Hi everyone, please subscribe to my channel. Blood Immortal Venerable, see playlist for other chapters and novels. I do not translate the novels. Credits goes to original translator and author of the novel. I only make it as an audiobook so it would be easier to just listen while doing other things. Credits goes to the author of the novel. I convert stories to audiobook for mental health, for multitasking purpose, for accessibility and time saving. Listening to audiobook is also beneficial for people who have disability. It improves our listening skills and improve our English comprehension, vocabulary and other things. So, thank you for listening. Thank you and thank you very much for your support. Chapter 921, Hope. Lamar was a Soul Sea Realm Master, which explained his speedy reaction. But the moment the black arrows pierced his ghost staff, his burly body began to twist. The 3 black arrows penetrated Lamar's enormous body one after the other. But since his body had begun to twist, 2 of 3 arrows pierced his right shoulder and his thigh, and the third passed through his chest, close to his heart. 6 small holes appeared in his body, pulsing with blood. Lamar was, however, a strong ogre, which meant that these injuries weren't fatal at all. But that didn't mean that the situation was not dangerous. Zen had aimed his 3 black arrows at Lamar's head and heart. If Lamar hadn't twisted his body at the last moment, he would have turned into a corpse by now. Lamar was lucky enough to avoid the 3 black arrows. He looked fearful as his gaze looked for the source of the arrows. As he found Zen, his fear turned to shock and fury. He is a human being. An early-stage human war sage. How did he shoot out 3 terrifying arrows? This guy is definitely not from the Purple Heart Sacred Place. Where is he from? Lamar muttered, staring at Zen. Esther, who was standing beside Zen, had clapped her hand to her mouth as she looked at Zen reverently. She had stayed with Zen in the Tower of Sin for a long time, so she knew the extent of Zen's strength. But she hadn't expected just the 3 arrows to hurt the Soul Sea Realm Master to this extent. This surprised her even more since Lamar was a strong ogre. And she could see that the 3 arrows had almost killed him. You are just a human warrior, but you've managed to injure me. You are remarkable. I'll give you one more chance to challenge me. And then, I'll let you die a miserable death. Lamar said flatly. In his shock and anger, Lamar had even given up on attacking Lacey. He gathered the raging flames together and charged towards Zen at an unbelievable speed. Above the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place, the Ogre War Sages and the Demon Knights War Sages stopped fighting. The black arrows that Zen had sent flying towards Lamar had shocked them, too. And now, they sneered as Lamar dashed towards Zen. Zen's black arrows had been a shock, but it could have been a fluke because Zen was merely an early-stage war sage after all. The Ogre War Sages believed that he might be in great trouble for provoking Lamar. Lamar's body was like a small flying mountain as it charged towards Zen. It formed an increasingly expanding shadow under the sunlight, enveloping Zen. Zen did not avert his eyes. He was pretty confident about this. Esther became more and more anxious by every minute that Zen didn't budge. She knew that Zen couldn't escape, even if he wanted to, because it was a Soul Sea Realm Master he was up against. To Esther's surprise, Zen shouted at her, "Esther, move away." At the same time, the power of the dragon scales within Zen's body began to circulate frantically. 1,000 dragon scales, 2,000 dragon scales, 3,000 dragon scales, 4,000 dragon scales, and then, 5,000 dragon scales. The dragon scales' power had reached its limit. Lamar was a Soul Sea Realm Master, but he didn't use his domain, perhaps because he despised Zen to no end. He probably felt that there was no need to open up his domain while dealing with an early-stage war sage. But for Zen, this was a good chance. As long as he avoided being trapped in the domain of the Ogre Soul Sea Realm Master, Zen was almost invincible in this great world. Now, in order to defeat his opponent, he had to make use of all of his strength to fight against Lamar, who was sorely underestimating his strength. Ha ha, you are just a war sage, but you aren't even trying to dodge my attack. You are really courageous. Or perhaps just stupid. As he watched Zen stand still as a mountain, Lamar was confused, but also extremely furious. Does such an ordinary war sage really dare challenge me? Lamar thought. The price of your courage is that you will be smashed to smithereens. Lamar had barely finished speaking when his bulky arms suddenly began to swell. His bronze fist was now half the size of Zen's body. Go to perdition, little guy. Lamar sneered. As the forceful energy erupted from his fist, he threw a punch towards Zen, who still stood his ground and didn't dodge him. Zen's gaze was calm, but the power in his hand was like a tidal wave as it gushed into his fist. He also swung his fist, a slight smile on his face. Zen's smile caused Lamar to hesitate a little. Zen didn't seem like a lunatic and he should know by now that he was going to die. But he was smiling, which led Lamar to guess that there was probably a trick involved in all of this. There was a saying among the ogres that no matter how cunning a wolf was, it could not defeat a stronger hunter. With the absolute advantage of power, Lamar believed that he could prevent Zen from playing any trick and could surely beat him. But when the fists of the two warriors collided with each other, the entire battle changed face. Everyone saw Lamar's fist crack at impact, the bones on his fist crumbling into tiny particles. The veins and vessels on his large arm burst and pieces of muscle peeled off his arm under the impact of such a huge force. Crack, 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 the bones in his hand began to break apart layer by layer, the terrifying power of Zen's punch continuing to work even after. Under the impact of Zen's powerful punch, the small bones began to split apart, disintegrating into fine powder. Just a single punch had smashed Lamar's right hand into smithereens. As his hand disintegrated, Lamar was sent flying backwards because of the power of the punch. The sky above the heavenly feather sacred place was dead silent. No one had imagined, even in their wildest dreams, that a Soul Sea Realm Master would be defeated by a first-level war sage. What was more, this ogre Soul Sea Realm Master had prided himself on his physical body. He was the patriarch of the Flaming Ogre Sacred Place. Esther, who had stayed several hundred feet away from Zen, was shocked at this development. As she looked on with glassy eyes, her shock apparent on her face, Esther suddenly thought of the title that Zen had obtained at the talent tablet in the Tower of Sin. The Celestial Position, the Golden Celestial Position. She did not know that besides the Golden Celestial Position, there were also many other titles like the Silver and the Bronze titles, on the talent tablet. But right now, Esther was hit with a rather preposterous but precise premonition that perhaps very few upper world warriors could obtain such a title as the Golden Celestial Position. Zen, that warrior is Zen, an ogre war sage suddenly roared as if he had discovered something amazing. A majority of the ogre war sages present had never seen Zen before, but a small number of them had once been in the Tower of Sin and seen Zen there before. They had left that place and become war sages once they had made a breakthrough and reached the higher cultivation level. Moments ago, those war sages hadn't been certain of Zen's identity. The figure had been somewhat familiar, but they learned from the information of the two ogre sacred places that Zen had long since left the Sea God continent. And now, someone had finally recognized Zen. Zen, he's that human warrior from the Tower of Sin. He's the enemy of our two ogre sacred places. He was just an early stage warlord a year ago. And he has become a war sage now. But how could a war sage like him defeat Lamar? The ogre war sages looked surprised yet indignant. Back then, Zen had driven the ogres out of the Tower of Sin because the powerful masters of the two ogre sacred places hadn't been able to enter the cursed land. But now, Zen wasn't relying on the Tower of Sin, and had openly stood at the heavenly feather sacred place to challenge Lamar. Zen's punch had even broken one of Lamar's arms while he looked unarmed. Many of the ogre war sages were unable to accept this truth. The war sages of the Demon Knight, on the other hand, had earlier been in a state of despair, but the moment they had recognized Zen, they became hopeful. Even though Zen was only a war sage, his battle with Lamar had revealed Zen's strength. This was enough for Zen to become their hope. Chapter 922, Stall him. Lamar was sent flying backwards, and crashed into hundreds of towering trees. The trees had already been burnt during the previous chaotic battles, leaving only carbonized tree trunks. After repeated collisions, an intense fire erupted from within Lamar's body. He finally stabilized himself and looked at his empty right shoulder. The shock and anger on his face grew. When he heard someone shout, Zen Luo, Lamar was even more astonished. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that the skinny human in front of him was the one who drove the ogres out of the Tower of Sin. Boom! Rays of intense flames spread out from Lamar's body. The high temperature immediately burned the 1,000-year-old trees to ashes. Lamar slowly rose higher as he stared calmly at Zen with his huge eyes. His calmness was even more terrifying than his rage. By now, everyone knew that Lamar had finally begun to take things seriously. You are Zen Luo? Lamar asked Zen and stared at him coldly. It is better to see once than to hear 100 times. You've just become a war sage, yet you have such great power. No wonder the ogres were driven out of the Tower of Sin by you. Back then, when Zen had chased a group of top-level ogre warlords out of the Tower of Sin, Lamar was furious. For the Flaming Ogre Sacred Place and the Dread Ogre Sacred Place, being chased out of the Tower of Sin by a human warlord was absolutely humiliating. Therefore, those top-level warlords who had left the Tower of Sin were useless existences in the ogres' eyes. Back then, being reprimanded by Lamar, the top-level warlords did not dare to raise their heads. However, a trace of unwillingness could be seen in their eyes. At that time, Lamar could not understand why these warlords were not convinced. Now, he finally understood that he could not judge Zen's strength based on his cultivation level. There wasn't the slightest trace of fear in Zen's eyes, and he was wondering how to deal with Lamar. His punch had damaged one of Lamar's arms, but he understood that if Lamar were to activate the Raging Fire domain, he would be unable to fight back. Once his connection with the Great World was cut off, he wouldn't be able to withstand the attack of a Soul Sea Realm Master with the help of his sacred weapons physique. This was Zen's hidden weakness. Lamar, who was slowly approaching Zen, continued, "Although I don't know how you did it, the power that you just unleashed is enough to make me admire you. It's a pity that you're only a war sage and don't have your own domain yet. I wonder if you can defeat me using just your strength." Lamar was treating Zen as an opponent on the same level as himself, and there wasn't the slightest trace of condescension in him anymore. He didn't hesitate in the slightest. His domain formed from streams of raging flames spread out, and he charged towards Zen once again. This time, Zen did not stand on the spot the way he had when he fought Lamar the first time. Now that his opponent had unleashed his domain, Zen would not stand there foolishly and accept his death. He started to retreat. Whoosh! Seeing Zen's retreating figure, Lamar mocked him, "What are you afraid of?" "My domain. I felt it. The power of the attack on you seems to have been absorbed by some kind of abyss. You are afraid that I'll cut you off from that abyss, right?" Lamar's guess was somewhat correct, except that he had not realized that the abyss he spoke of was actually the entire Great World. Zen had transferred the attack that landed on him to the magnetic sacred mountain. Zen's eyebrows creased. Lamar was indeed very sensitive. Although he didn't know that Zen had fused with the will of the Great World, he had come very close to decoding the mystery. And now, Zen's withdrawal from the fight confirmed Lamar's suspicions. The Raging Fire domain spreading from Lamar's body became even brighter, and the heat wave even ignited the forest beneath the Heavenly Feather sacred place. The entire sacred place was already submerged in the sea of fire, and now, under the heat wave, the line of sight was also refracted. Zen was retreating fast, but Lamar was faster. Many of the Demon Knight members immediately became nervous. For them, Zen's sudden appearance was their last hope. However, as they watched Zen retreating, their hopes started dwindling. He alone wouldn't be able to reverse the situation. Just as Zen was about to get enveloped by Lamar's domain, a blue ray of light descended and Lacey's water pattern domain cut down from above, blocking the path between Zen and Lamar. "Do you have to go all out against a junior? Lamar, aren't you going too far?" Lacey's voice was icy. "Your real opponent is me." Lamar shook his head and sneered, "Lacey, you are not my opponent. Zen is not some junior. Even though he's just become a war sage, he has enough qualifications to be my opponent." "It's my honor," said Zen from behind Lacey, the dark golden longbow appearing in his hand and a black arrow once again affixed on the bowstring. He then added, "Lacey, find a way to stall this guy." When he saw the black arrow in Zen's hand, Lamar's eyes twitched. Lacey had already seen the power of this kind of black arrow. If she could stop Lamar, it might be possible for Zen to kill him. "All right, I'll do my best." Lacey bit down on her tongue gently. With a sway of her body, she ignited her blood essence and a dark blue tornado appeared in her water pattern domain. Like hundreds of tentacles, the tornadoes charged towards Lamar. "Stall me, ha, in your dreams." Lamar gently pinched the air, and a series of flaming sabers shot out from his domain, instantly cutting off the tornadoes one by one. Just as the two Soul Sea Realm Masters were fighting, the black arrow in Zen's hand shot out again. Whoosh, bang, 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 the black arrow accelerated 3 times in the air and reached Lamar in the blink of an eye. But he was prepared this time. His body flashed as he narrowly avoided Zen's arrow. Zen's first arrow had missed its target. The second arrow arrived in an instant. Following this was the third arrow. And then the fourth arrow. Lamar found it hard to deal with Zen's and Lacey's attacks at the same time. His strength was enough to suppress Lacey, but it would take him a while to take her down. In addition to that, the water-related cultivation method that she practiced was the natural enemy of his fire-related cultivation method. On top of that, he also needed to focus on dodging Zen's deadly black arrows. He had lost an arm, so it was even more difficult for him to focus on fighting Lacey's tornadoes. It was a losing battle. Zen's black arrows flew past Lamar's ears several times and almost pierced through his head. "Hurry and help Master Lamar." When the Ogre War Sages below saw Lamar in such a dangerous situation, they rushed forward to help him. However, the Demon Knight War Sages would naturally not let them come up. Soon, the War Sages in the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place once again started a chaotic battle. Lamar cursed violently. He never thought that he would fall in trouble. If this carried on, he would be killed by Zen sooner or later. However, 3 more beams of light shot out from the horizon. 3 more mighty warriors at the Soul Sea realm. But when Lamar noticed who the 3 mighty warriors were, he was ecstatic while Lacey's and Zen's faces darkened. Omari, Santino, help me kill that guy who's shooting the arrows. He roared while resisting Lacey. 2 of the 3 warriors in the sky were the other Soul Sea realm masters from the Flaming Ogre Sacred Place. Omari and Santino were chasing down one of the Soul Sea realm masters of the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place, Chantel. Chantel was slightly stronger than Omari and Santino, and she was able to continuously escape their combined attacks. Thus, from the start, she had lured the 2 Ogre Soul Sea realm masters away from the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place. After they circled around a corner of the Sea God continent for over 10,000 miles, they had finally made a detour. Chapter 923, Zen's Friends. What? Kill the guy who's shooting the arrows? The 2 Ogre Soul Sea realm masters in the sky looked at Lamar, puzzled. They had thought that Lamar could defeat Lacey easily. But they hadn't expected Lamar to be faced with such a huge disadvantage. Whoosh! Another ray of black light shot out from behind Lacey. The black arrow brushed past Lamar's face, leaving a thumb-sized wound in his rough face. If this arrow had been 2 or 3 inches to the side, it would have pierced through Lamar's brain and killed him. You two, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and kill that brat. He is Zen Luo, Lamar roared. He was furious at Omari and Santino for standing there like statues when he was so clearly in danger. Zen Luo, that brat is Zen Luo. Santino and Omari had noticed that the arrows shot by Zen were surprisingly powerful. Lamar had become truly helpless when Lacey had stalled him. Ha ha, so this is Zen. Lamar, I will help you kill him. With a hearty laugh, Omari changed direction and flew past Lacey, straight towards Zen. As he saw this, Chantel, a Soul Sea realm master of the Demon Knight, didn't wait for Zen or Lacey to say anything. Instead, she turned her body to face Omari and sent out tens of thousands of dark blue wind blades to stop him. I am your opponent, Santino said as he came to stand before Chantel. The ogres had 3 Soul Sea realm masters, but the Demon Knight only had 2. The situation had become extremely unfavorable for Zen. Besides the War Sages and Soul Sea realm masters in the sky, there were also countless warlords, war generals, and war fighters bathed in blood as they engaged in a life-and-death fight in the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place. However, the Demon Knight members were extremely powerful. In battles between warlords and warlords, between war generals, and between war fighters and war fighters, the Demon Knight had always gained the upper hand, forcing the ogres to retreat step by step. But right now, the warlords, war generals, and war fighters of the Demon Knight did not wish to fight. They were focused on the battle in the sky. Their winning wouldn't determine the results of the war. The war would be over if the Soul Sea realm masters of the Demon Knight lost. So when the Demon Knight members watched the 3 powerful ogre warriors at the Soul Sea realm enter the battle, despair filled them. Are our queens unable to protect us anymore? A woman of the Demon Knight asked sorrowfully. The weapon in her hand had already dropped to the ground, her expression gloomy as she muttered to herself. She wasn't the only one who was praying. The other Demon Knight women were also praying for the 3 queens of the Demon Knight to bring them a miracle at the last moment. The 8th diagram wheel was floating far away in the sky. The ancestral dragon was jumping around on the wheel while making gurgling noises. It seemed to be in a fretful mood. Zen's imprinting had been engraved in the ancestral dragon's soul. It could feel the danger Zen was facing, but Delroy, who was standing to the side, used an enchanted barrier to envelop the ancestral dragon. It was still so young that it couldn't cross this barrier, no matter how hard it tried. Let's go down and help Zen. We can't really let him die here, Delroy said coldly. Woody snorted and said, humph. He knew that we wouldn't watch him die. That's why he rushed in without a care. Max smiled and said, at least he brought us to the Sea God continent. How hard would it be to deal with a few ogre rats? Woody, Dorothea, you two go help him. Dorothea nodded and jumped down from the 8th diagram wheel. Despite his unwillingness, Woody waved the black nether saber in his hand, turned into a streak of light, and flew towards the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place. When Lacey saw another ogre at the Soul Sea realm rushing down, she gritted her teeth and bit the tip of her tongue again, continuing to burn her blood essence. Burning one's blood essence could produce an even stronger power in a short period of time, but one's blood essence couldn't burn indefinitely. It would take a long time to recover and replenish the used blood essence. Splash! Watercolored tornadoes began to dance about crazily in quick succession. But Lacey knew that it was impossible for her to stop the two ogres at the Soul Sea realm. She shifted her gaze to Zen and noticed that he did not shoot any arrows again. Instead, he was standing still with a smile on his face. What is going on? Has he given up? She thought. Lacey hadn't interacted much with Zen, but she understood his personality. He was definitely not someone who would give up so easily, but why would he stop shooting arrows? As she finished the thought, Lacey saw two people rapidly approaching them from a distance. A man and a woman. The man held a black saber while the woman had a flower in her right eye. They looked strange, but the strength that radiated off them was inexplicably incomparable. Lacey's eyes widened as she realized that the two of them were actually above the Soul Sea realm. Even from afar, Lacey could feel their bodies emit an extremely terrifying aura, something that not even Amber could compare to. Are they at the Spirit Supreme realm? Lacey thought. The Demon Knight members in this world were still in contact with the ones in the upper world. Thanks to the queens' statues, it wasn't difficult for them to learn about the upper world, so it had been pretty easy for Lacey to reach this conclusion. But the three Ogre Soul Sea Realm Masters were different. They didn't even know that the realm above the Soul Sea Realm was called the Spirit Supreme Realm. So when they saw Dorothea and Woody, they were confused. Why are they so powerful? They all wondered. They are even more powerful than the warriors at the Soul Sea Realm. Are they really immortals from the upper world? The fear and bewilderment were palpable among the members of the Demon Knight as well as the ogres. Both sides were speculating about the intentions of the approaching man and woman. Which side were they actually on? With the strength of these two added, destroying the Heavenly Feather sacred place and the two sacred places of the ogres was just too simple. But how could such powerful warriors interfere in a war of this level? The answer came quickly. Dorothea slowly floated towards Zen and said, "Hey, are you done? Finish this battle as soon as possible. We still need to find materials for Hank to make the puppets." Dorothea and her companions weren't taking the battle seriously at all. To the Celestial Position warriors, this kind of war was as boring. Woody glared coldly at Zen and said, "You are useless. You can't even defeat a guy at the Soul Sea realm. It can't be that you have enough talent to obtain the golden title of the Celestial Position." Zen shrugged, not showing any signs of weakness as he faced Woody. He only smiled and said, "When I step into the Spirit Supreme Realm, I'll beat 10 guys like you." Dorothea laughed out loud and said, "That is quite possible." To be honest, when Woody and Dorothea were at the Life and Death Realm, they couldn't fight against a powerful warrior at the Soul Sea Realm. But Zen could do this. He would be considered a talented warrior even in the Celestial Position race. Woody, however, hadn't been fond of Zen from the beginning, which was why he mocked him. The members of the Demon Knight and the ogres stared at this trio as they chatted and ribbed each other. Lacey, Chantel, and many war sages of the Demon Knight became excited as they saw who the two mighty masters were talking to. Some of them had felt that they had been collapsing before these two came along. They had been tensed for a long time and now, they could finally relax. Because at this moment, as they watched Zen banter with Dorothea and Woody, they knew that the Heavenly Feather sacred place would be safe. The ogres, on the other hand, had different thoughts. The three Soul Sea Realm Masters, Lamar, Omari, and Santino, as well as the war sages, war lords, and war fighters, felt their hearts plummeting into a bottomless abyss. Zen and the powerful warriors seemed like friends, and this was a death sentence to the ogres. For the two sacred places of the ogres, this battle was a gamble. Everything was on the line. The appearance of Dorothea and Woody was probably a preamble to their disappearance from the Sea God continent. Chapter 924, Wipe Out the Ogres. The two powerful masters of the Spirit Supreme Realm looked calm. It made the ogres tense. They felt as if they were trapped under a heavy mountain. "Stop chatting, let's get down to business." Dorothea's words made Woody grumpy. He hastily ended the subject at hand, his gaze falling on the tall and sturdy ogres. Casually waving the black nether saber, he said, "Fortunately, the race we need to wipe out are the ogres. I find I don't have a very good opinion of them." Dorothea smiled. "What a coincidence. I don't have a good opinion of them either." In the upper world, the ogre race was not considered to be weak, but they were too aggressive and overbearing. The Celestial Position had always taken a neutral stance in the upper world. Their goals were vastly different from those of the other races. Human race, Demon Knight, Ogre race, and the other races all had similar aims of expanding their own races as the core, but the Celestial Position was formed by the talents of countless other races. They represented a unique group in the universe, their goals rather different from those of other ordinary races. Because the celestial position was neutral and strong, they shared a good relationship with most of the other races. For instance, they were on good terms with the humans, Demon Knight and some other powerful groups in the universe. However, celestial position had a bone of contention with the ogre race. The ogres had a strong sense of loyalty toward their own race. They did not allow any ogre talents to join celestial position. If they found out that someone had betrayed them, they would banish them as traitors and hunt them down to the ends of the world. The ogres were also obstinate and fierce. They had fought celestial position several times. Sometimes, a few supreme lords had gotten involved. Thus, the ogres were not on friendly terms with the members of celestial position. Now that several celestial position warriors had come down to the lower world and encountered these ogres, how could they possibly let them go unharmed? They were rather pressed for time. Even it was not for Zen's sake, they would still take this opportunity to destroy the sacred places of the ogre race. Hearing Dorothea and Woody, Lamar got anxious. Even though he couldn't figure out where the masters had come from, he would not subject his flaming ogre sacred place to destruction. TW2 respected masters. May I have a word with you? Lamar asked, his coarse voice trembling. What is it? Woody looked at Lamar indifferently. This matter is with regards to a grudge between the two sacred places of our ogre race and the Heavenly Feather sacred place, Lamar said. I'm afraid it is unsuitable for you two masters to interfere like this. Woody only smiled. Of course, he knew that the Soul Sea Realm masters of the ogre race were on their last legs. Unsuitable, why? The disputes between the two races should be resolved by the two sides involved. Masters, please show us some mercy. Lamar knew that the excuse he made up was untenable. In the world of warriors, strength determined everything. If a powerful master wanted to kill someone, he would find 100 reasons and more to justify it. However, in this situation, Lamar could only brace himself and make excuses in the hopes that the two masters would let them go. Lacey and Chantel were nervous too. The situation was obvious. The two Spirit Supreme Realm masters before them were to decide the fate of the battle. However, they weren't certain that the two masters would be on Zen's side. What if Lamar managed to convince them? If you are kind enough not to intervene in this matter, the Flaming Ogre Sacred Place and Dread Ogre Sacred Place would offer up all our treasures. We will bow down before you, Lamar continued. Enough. Woody yawned and raised the black nether saber in his hand, giving Lamar a wicked smile. I have no interest in treasures belonging to some small sacred places. I am rather more interested in slaughtering ogres. Save your words. Let's start. Dorothea smiled faintly, the flower in her eye starting to spin. Lamar, Santino, and Omari realized that begging was useless. The expressions on their faces changed. The forceful energy within their bodies exploded and in an instant they flew off in 3 separate directions. No one was willing to sit still and await death. Knowing that they were unable to fight these powerful masters, the 3 of them chose to escape simultaneously. They want to escape. Woody's face looked fierce. His body suddenly turned into a black shadow. Circling the air quickly, it flashed and disappeared from everyone's sight. The next moment, the crowd saw the black shadow fly toward Santino. They didn't see how Woody was attacking. They only witnessed a flash of black light that hit Santino's mountain-like body, making it spout blood mist. He quickly fell to the ground with a thud. After killing Santino, Woody turned into a streak of lightning and charged toward Omari. As for Dorothea, she let out a bell-like laughter and chased after Lamar. Compared to Woody's pretty good saber skills and fast speed, Dorothea was slow in her pace as she followed Lamar. Meanwhile, the flower in her eye began to emit a faint green light. Under the influence of the green light, Lamar's speed gradually slowed down. Very soon, a terrified expression covered his face. He howled in a frenzy and waved the ghost staff, causing raging flames to engulf the empty space. Lamar kept roaring hysterically. As he waved the ghost staff frantically, blood arrows burst out from his chest and his heart exploded. The ogres all had enormous build and their hearts were more powerful than those of ordinary creatures. After his heart burst, the blood arrows flew several hundreds of feet away. Lamar's power began to rapidly weaken soon after. He fell down in no time, his eyes as wide as saucers. Even as he breathed his last, he was traumatized by the fear. It's an illusion, Lacey said in a low voice. It was fear that caused his heart to explode. That led to his death. Chantel nodded, feeling like Lamar's frightening death would long linger on her mind. The ogres were indeed tyrannical, but they were also brave. How terrifying was the illusion that it had scared him out of his wits and made his heart explode. Dorothea was still smiling, her hands behind her back. The flower in her right eye stopped spinning as she flew towards Zen. Whoosh! After killing Omari and Santino, Woody soon materialized beside Zen. "All right, we have finished off these 3 rats," he stated coldly. "It's time to ask your demon knight friends to help us gather the materials." Now that the 3 mighty ogre warriors of the Soul Sea realm had been killed off, the confidence level of the remaining ogres dropped to their feet. They began scattering in all directions. As for the warriors of the demon knight, they were enjoying a boosted morale. They began chasing and killing the fleeing ogres. Lacey and Chantel did not join the others in the killing. The outcome of this battle was a foregone conclusion, and the 2 of them clearly knew what to do next. Before Zen could even respond to Woody, Lacey respectfully bowed to him. "Master, the demon knight will forever remember what you did today, but we do not know of the materials you require. We would certainly do our best to help." Woody chuckled. "Aha, they are not very special materials," he said courteously. "You should exterminate those little rats first." Seeing Woody's attitude, Zen felt suspicious. Woody was a hateful man and never had anything nice to say. Why was he being so polite to the demon knight? His face reflected his confusion. Dorothea, who stood beside him, chuckled and stated to him in a low voice, "The woman he fell in love with is from the demon knight." Comprehension dawned on Zen. Now he knew why Woody was acting so strangely. The celestial position consisted of talents from different races. It was not unusual for demon knight members to be a part of the celestial position. Indeed, Woody loved a girl from the demon knight, so he was courteous to the members of the race. No wonder he had just gone all out to kill the ogres. At the moment, Chantel spoke up, her face full of worry. "Lacey, I don't know how everything is going with Amber. If the Dread Ogre's sacred place really went after her, I'm afraid she might be in danger." Zen's eyes suddenly flashed as he shuffled through the memories of the great world. He soon released a sigh of relief, saying with a smile, "Amber is fine. She is currently on her way back." He then lifted his head and looked into the distance. A few minutes later, a ray of light in the sky shot toward the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place. Chapter 925, Amber's Return. The streak of light was extremely fast as it approached the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place. Both Lacey and Chantel breathed huge sighs of relief the moment they realized who that streak of light was. It was Amber. Her arrival gave them hope but, at the same time, made them question just what kind of ability Zen had to be able to foretell her return. Could he see the future or something? Even Esther, who stood nearby, was equally perplexed. She then remembered the other time when Zen had exhibited such a skill. When he fought with Soroyan, Zen had been able to find out how long his opponent had lived accurately down to the number of the days. He also seemed to be aware of everything that went on in this great world. Was he, perhaps, an incarnation of an omnipotent deity? Whoosh! Their thoughts were interrupted by Amber's frantic advance, her light purple robe swishing behind her as she drew closer. The anger on her face was very apparent when she saw the scene that awaited her. Since the fellows from the Dread Ogre's sacred place dared to chase after her, she surmised that the Flaming Ogre's sacred place would definitely attack the Heavenly Feather sacred place. She knew that Lacey and Chantel would not be able to stop the invasion just by themselves. Thick smoke rose above the Heavenly Feather sacred place, deepening her frown. If it was really destroyed, then she swore to kill every single ogre from both the Flaming Ogre's sacred place and Dread Ogre's sacred place even if it cost her life. Fortunately, the sight of Lacey and Chantel unharmed calmed her heart, especially when she saw a familiar, white-robed human youth. Zen. The sight of Zen clarified her thoughts. The Heavenly Feather sacred place's victory against the ogres' invasion definitely had something to do with him. Amber. Both Lacey and Chantel greeted her with joy once she arrived. "Amber, are you all right? The Dread Ogre's sacred place knew about your movements and they took advantage of the fact that you were undergoing tribulation." "You mean these 3 fellows?" Amber asked and suddenly held up 3 large heads in her hand. One of them was the leader of the Dread Ogre's sacred place. All of them were at the Soul Sea realm and had died by Amber's hands. Zen smiled, realizing how valiant Amber really was. Not only did she safely pass through the big heavenly tribulation, she had also been able to kill the 3 Soul Sea realm ogres that had come to possibly eliminate her during her most vulnerable state. She casually threw the heads away and headed for Zen. She almost froze midway when she caught a glimpse of Dorothea and Woody standing behind him. She would never admit it, but the sight of those 2 scared her slightly. Their aura was extremely powerful given that they were obviously Spirit Supreme Realm warriors. She figured that they were the ones responsible for reversing their situation. Zen was extremely talented, but she knew that he would still be unable to face against mighty Soul Sea Realm warriors even after breaking through to the life and death realm. Amber's gaze was on them as she spoke. Zen, just now. Zen nodded in confirmation as he gestured to the two behind him. We have to thank my two friends here for their help. Amber immediately knelt down on one knee in front of Dorothea and Woody. Thank you so much. My clan will forever be grateful. Dorothea looked indifferent, but Woody laughed out loud. Don't mention it. You've been recognized by the celestial position, right? Woody asked. Amber stood up and her eyes flashed upon hearing Woody's words. The celestial position? Are you talking about the talent tablet? Woody nodded. I can feel the celestial position's mark on your body. If I'm not wrong, you should be in the second row. Amber nodded in affirmation. Besides Zen, she was the only person who managed to place herself in the second row and had been marked by the celestial position. That's great then. You and I are of the same race, Woody cheerfully told her. Zen rolled his eyes at this. He had also been recognized by the celestial position but never received such friendly treatment from Woody. Following the exchange, Amber quickly learned the purpose of Zen's visit and immediately instructed Lacey and Chantel to clean up the mess of their sacred place while she helped them gather the materials. Under Dorothea's guide, the 5 people on the 8 diagram wheel also went over to enter the holy tree with Amber. Hank quickly gave Amber a list, but she felt somewhat embarrassed when she looked at it. Most of the materials were readily available in the Heavenly Feather sacred place, and some could be procured within a day or two, but there were a few that she had never heard of before. Woody, however, sighed in understanding. I know. The lower world lacks resources. Hank, replace some of the materials. Hank took back the list. It was fortunate that he was a master puppeteer and was able to come up with a few alternatives on the spot. Once he was done, he handed it back to Amber, who figured that it would take around 1 to 2 days to collect all the materials they needed. The 7 celestial position members would have to rest in the Demon Knight's place for the time being. It was around that time that Miguel arrived, having rushed over from the Purple Heart sacred place. The news of the ogres' invasion had reached the humans a bit late, and, by the time they arrived, things had already settled down. Amber, on the other hand, couldn't help but feel depressed once she saw the extent of the damage. The Heavenly Feather sacred place had taken quite a beating and was charred here and there. Miguel quickly went to console her. Let's exterminate the Flaming Ogre sacred place and the Dread Ogre sacred place, he declared fiercely. The battle earlier had killed all the mighty warriors of both ogre sacred places. The Purple Heart sacred place alone would now be able to completely annihilate the ogres if they wished. Amber nodded at his words before turning to Zen. Zen, I would like to know how my queen is. The light from Lavender's statue had almost completely faded some time ago. Amber was beside herself with worry, thinking that their queen had perished or something. However, just as it had almost dissipated, the light gradually stabilized and was now gradually recovering. Still, Amber remained wary. If she wasn't about to undergo the big heavenly tribulation, then she would have gone all the way to Central Region to see Zen just to inquire about Lavender's well-being. Zen took out a brown branch and Amber's eyes immediately widened. The soul-nurturing wood, she exclaimed. Her heart immediately dropped at the sight of the soul-nurturing wood. This extraordinary branch was used to help someone hold on to his or her last breath of life, which meant that Lavender, right now, was in a critically ill state. Zen's face was also filled with grief. Lavender blocked a soul attack for me. Her soul was on the verge of collapsing, so I had no other choice but to place her inside the soul-nurturing wood. Amber gritted her teeth. Let's use the holy tree's life force again. It would at least be able to awaken our queen. Zen, however, shook his head. I don't think that's going to work. The entire Heavenly Feather sacred place was terribly devastated from the battle. If they wanted to restore it to its former glory, they would have to rely on the holy tree's power. Right now, the huge holy tree was riddled with holes, and if they used it on Lavender now, it would probably drain it of its power. My queen is more important. I can feel the holy tree's will, and it is willing to sacrifice itself to save her. Amber insisted. Zen could only sigh. Lavender is like this because of me. I'll find a way to revive her, he said. Besides, the nourishment of the holy tree alone will not be enough to completely repair her damaged soul. The power of the soul-nurturing wood in his hand wasn't any weaker than that of the holy tree. Its effects, however, were slower, but it was enough to protect Lavender's soul. Just then, they were interrupted by a yellow-robed demon knight girl who bowed down to Amber. Ailsa, what is it? Ailsa was a 3rd-level war sage, so Amber was curious why she was here. Chapter 926, A Despicable Jerk. Ailsa had kept her head down all this time. However, Amber's voice made her raise her head and they all saw how her eyes glowed with a strange azure light, like otherworldly fireflies on a dark, summer night. She immediately rushed towards Zen, hands outstretched and ready to snatch the soul-nurturing wood from his hands. Her actions shocked him and he was immediately on guard. He had never thought a Demon Knight member would endanger Lavender like this. The Queen's soul was extremely weak and fragile. Any slight attack towards the soul-nurturing wood held the possibility of destroying Lavender's soul completely. With a flick of his wrist, Zen quickly threw the soul-nurturing wood into the air. Ailsa's eyes were trained onto the brown branch and she immediately launched herself into the air to grab the soul-nurturing wood. Zen, however, was quick to catch Ailsa by the ankle and pull her down forcefully. "Come down." He threw the azure-eyed girl to the ground while he caught the soul-nurturing wood safely in his hands. The two guards beside Amber were immediately onto Ailsa and forced her onto the ground. "Ailsa," Amber fiercely berated the girl. "What do you think you're doing?" Ailsa ignored Amber and instead sneered at Zen. "You're Zen, right?" Zen frowned. This voice, he murmured to himself. He had heard this voice before in the Holy Tree Hall from the Queen statue that he had smashed into pieces. The members of the Demon Knight immediately knelt on one knee upon hearing Ailsa's voice. Queen. Their race had a total of 3 queens. Lavender was the queen of killings while the one in front of them was in charge of punishment. It seemed this queen had used some kind of secret technique to temporarily occupy Ailsa's body with the intent of harming or perhaps even killing Lavender. Amber had a rough guess why the queen of punishment wanted to harm Lavender, but it was a dispute that she couldn't really meddle with. Right now, she had to maintain a neutral facade and see how the situation unfolded. Zen, on the other hand, was not part of the Demon Knight race. For him, the dispute between the queens did not matter. If anyone wanted to harm Lavender, then he would do whatever it took to eliminate that person. Zen sneered coldly. "Yes, I am Zen and you're the Demon Knight's Queen of Punishment, right? May I know your name?" "You are not qualified to know my name," Ailsa said haughtily. "I advise you to hand over that soul-nurturing wood and let Lavender's soul dissipate in this world. If you do that, I'll consider letting you off." Zen suddenly froze, quite unsure of what he had just heard. However, once he realized that the queen was serious, he couldn't help but let out a loud laugh. Ailsa frowned at his reaction. "What's so funny?" she asked. Zen wheezed for a bit more before walking towards Ailsa. He coldly sneered at her as he looked straight at her glowing, azure eyes. "No wonder." "No wonder what?" Ailsa asked, the annoyance obvious in her curt tone. "No wonder Lavender said you were a jerk," Zen cursed mercilessly. "Her soul is extremely vulnerable right now, but you actually want to take advantage of her situation and kill her. You're indeed merciless." Normally, a rude and insulting remark towards a Demon Knight Queen would be dealt with swiftly and ruthlessly. Amber, for one, would not hesitate to behead anyone brave enough to disrespect their beloved queens. However, the other party could be considered as an affiliate of another queen, so Amber could do nothing but keep her head down and let the circumstance work itself out. Zen's remark struck a nerve, but Ailsa merely smiled. "You're very daring, aren't you? So what if you have the fate to lead the world of chaos? The opening of the chaotic world is not for you alone. Every time a chaotic world comes, many warriors with your fate die, and believe me, you will definitely be one of those who shall perish." Her statements were strong, but Zen remained calm and collected in front of the queen. "It doesn't matter whether I'll perish or not. What matters is that you're a jerk." Ailsa frowned in displeasure at his words, but she decided to use her honeyed voice to try and tempt Zen. "If you give me the soul-nurturing wood, I can use the power of the Demon Knight to let you." "You're a jerk," Zen rudely interrupted. "My status is higher than Lavender's and my abilities far surpass what you can imagine." "You're a jerk. You're a jerk." Zen probably repeated himself around 7 or 8 more times before the queen finally snapped and dropped her attempt of tempting the youth. She quickly controlled Ailsa's body and roared, "Amber! Kill him!" Amber, however, did not try to kill Zen. She merely continued kneeling respectfully on the ground, along with the rest of the Demon Knight members. None of her subjects were willing to go through with her order, which meant that the Queen of Punishment had to kill Zen herself. However, such a feat wouldn't be so easy. For one, Ailsa was a mere 3rd-level war sage, so she wouldn't be able to kill Zen. Besides, since the queen merely controlled Ailsa's body, her original strength would be greatly reduced. It was the same case as when Zen had controlled Brianna's body with the soul core but was unable to employ Brianna's full strength. Bang, bang, with a frustrated roar, Ailsa rushed towards Zen and attacked. However, a few strikes were all it took for Zen to completely overpower her. That wasn't the end of it though. Zen quickly shot himself towards the Holy Tree Hall and went inside. One of the Demon Knight members lowered her voice and quickly informed Amber, Zen has entered the hall. Amber merely shushed her, just pretend you didn't see that. As soon as he entered the hall, Zen walked up to the Blue Queen's statue and carelessly patted it twice. What else do you want to say? He asked with a smile. The Queen of Punishment's statue trembled and opened her eyes. Just as she was about to open her mouth, Zen beat her to it. You're a jerk. The teasing had become too much and the statue's exquisite face twisted in anger. How dare you insult me like this? If one day, you ascend into the upper world all. Clang, it was already too late. Just before she could finish her sentence, Zen had already thrown a strong punch and shattered the statue into pieces. You're really a pretentious jerk, he shouted, shaking his fists with a smile. Satisfied with the result of his handiwork, Zen exited the hall and returned to Amber's side. None of the Demon Knight members gave any indication of having acknowledged the events that had just transpired, seemingly determined to pretend nothing had happened. Miguel and his men though were obviously dumbfounded, not really sure of what was going on. Zen's expression was relaxed but deep inside he was already boiling with determination. Once Lavender's soul was recovered, he vowed to quickly find a body for her and help her regain all that she had lost. As for that Queen of Punishment, he swore in his heart to punish and torture her for her despicable deeds. Now that the matter was taken care of, everyone went about their ways and the Heavenly Feather sacred place was left to recover. Its healing rate was actually incredible. The holy tree's trunk was scorched black but the roots were fortunately untouched. These roots ran several thousand feet underground with a few extending over 100 miles horizontally. It constantly absorbed nutrients from the earth and was a vital factor in speeding up the tree's recovery process. As it healed, the tree also nourished the Heavenly Feather sacred place. Green seedlings had already sprouted all around which meant that it would be able to fully recover in no time at all. Meanwhile, Miguel and the rest members of the Purple Heart sacred place had teamed up with Lacey and the other Soul Sea Realm masters to attack the two ogre sacred places. After the ogre race's expulsion from the Tower of Sin, it was obviously only a matter of time before they declined. What the other races did not expect was the swiftness of their extermination. In less than a year, the two imposing ogre sacred places would be wiped out by humans and the Demon Knight. The ogre's downfall was considered good news for the other races. The previously powerful race had been too brutal and tyrannical compared to the gentler human race and Demon Knight race. Even after the humans took control of the Tower of Sin, they did not abuse their position to break any rules or annihilate other races. Within 2 days, the Demon Knight members were finally able to gather all the materials Hank had requested. Once he had all the materials, making the puppets was a piece of cake for Hank. In just half a day, he was able to fashion 8 puppets for them to use. Chapter 927, Confirm. What was amazing was that the 8 puppets were all true to life. Every single one of them was the exact replica of the people in the group. Zen sized up the puppets. Finally, his gaze landed on the puppet that resembled him. He was shocked and disappointed. Why is my puppet weaker than all of yours? The materials used to make these puppets were very complicated. The strength of the 7 puppets of the 7 celestial position masters was equivalent to that of a life and death realm warrior. However, Zen's puppet strength was equivalent to that of a virtual tribulation realm warrior. Woody retorted, isn't that accurate? After all, you are still a lot weaker than us. Zen rolled his eyes. He didn't want to waste time arguing with this fellow. Max spoke up, anyway, it's all done. Now we can control these puppets and enter the cursed land. Everyone nodded their heads. They had been waiting for some days and now they were eager to enter the Tower of Crystal. Everyone poured a part of their souls into their corresponding puppets. One after another, the puppets opened their eyes and came to life. But Zen was lost at this point. He didn't know how to split his soul, so he wasn't able to pour a part of it into his puppet. While his soul was very close to the Jasper Fighting Soul realm, he hadn't actually stepped into the Jasper Fighting Soul realm. So he hadn't practiced the soul-splitting technique. He could only control the shape of his own soul for now. Splitting the soul involved peeling off a part of one's soul to form a single entity, which was completely independent. Lavender's soul was actually a fragment. Her physical body and main soul had already perished, thus that soul fragment was now her only remaining soul. Zen just didn't know what to do. Woody flashed a mocking smile, enjoying Zen's obvious discomfort. Thankfully Dorothea offered to help. Zen, let me help you. First, detach part of your soul from your body, she explained. Zen did as Dorothea instructed. He squeezed out a portion of his soul from the spot between his eyebrows. Then, the flower in Dorothea's right eye turned slightly, and an invisible force gently floated out. Zen felt the light pull of this force, and a wisp of his soul separated from the main soul. Now Zen was able to control this portion of his soul. He poured it into his own puppet and brought it to life. The 8 of them sat down on the floor solemnly, while the 8 puppets hopped onto the 8 diagram wheel. They didn't waste any more time and immediately took off to the cursed land. The puppets would not be affected by the cursed land. The 8 diagram wheel didn't pause and directly entered the area. Soon, a huge tower appeared in front of everyone's eyes. It was the Tower of Sin, also the Tower of Crystal called by the celestial position. "That's it," said Max's puppet excitedly, "it really is the Tower of Crystal." "It seems that the Tower of Crystal hasn't been fully unfolded yet," Delroy observed. Max nodded and said, "Yes, it isn't fully developed." Zen's face was full of curiosity, as he asked, "Fully developed? What do you mean?" Max smiled and replied, "You'll understand soon." Whoosh! Hank's puppet was controlling the 8 diagram wheel. He quickly landed it at the entrance of the first floor of the Tower of Crystal. Many creatures from the different races of the Sea God continent stared at this mysterious sight of the 8 diagram wheel with the puppets on it. Nobody on the Sea God continent was skilled in making puppets. They did not see any signs of life in these puppets. Everyone was intrigued and immediately launched into a frenzied discussion about this alien phenomenon. "What are these things? They don't seem to be humans." Zen, "Oh no, one of them looks like Zen. Has he returned to the Sea God continent? Look closely, these fellows seem to be made from mica gold. But what exactly are they?" Max ignored all the creatures who were watching them and walked directly towards the Tower of Crystal. At the sight of these celestial position warriors, the 2 giants guarding the entrance quickly pulled open the gates. Even though they were puppets, they had strength comparable to the life and death realm and they were controlled by Spirit Supreme Realm Masters. No one in the Tower of Sin could be their match. As they entered and started climbing up the floors, they attracted the attention of countless creatures inside. 1 floor, 2 floors, 3 floors, 4 floors. As Zen started climbing up from the ground floor, familiar scenes from the tower came into his view, triggering many past memories. He never thought he would actually return to the Tower of Sin, and in such a form. Zen lamented the days gone by. Looking at his aggrieved expression, Woody laughed maliciously and remarked, "Your lie is about to be exposed, but why do I feel so sad?" Zen smiled wryly and retorted, "Someone's about to swallow his own weapon. I am also feeling very sad." Woody was startled at his confidence. Could it be that he had really obtained the Golden Celestial Position title from the Talent Tablet? Impossible. Woody shook his head, his face filled with disbelief. As for the others, they didn't bother worrying about it at this point. The truth would unveil itself. After reaching the 10th floor, everything would become clear. The ongoing battle on the 10th floor of the Tower of Sin was still as intense as ever. As soon as the group reached the 10th floor, they saw a group of people surrounding the talent tablet. It seemed that someone had entered the tablet to take the test. Max took a few steps but suddenly stopped and craned his neck to see above the heads of the creatures of various races. He stared at the wall in bewilderment. Zen's name was right on the top, above the first row. There was no need to squeeze into the crowd to read it. This was the reason for Max's abrupt halt. Delroy had also paused. These puppets created by Hank were ingenious. Their expressions were vivid and lifelike. Delroy's gaze was complicated and he seemed to be deep in thought. Dorothea's eyes were shining bright. She chuckled softly and said, "Looks like my hunch was right." The others were all silent. Woody's expression was the most exaggerated. His mouth was wide open and his face turned dull. He didn't know what to think at this moment. When Zen had obtained the Golden Celestial Position title from the Talent Tablet back then, many races from the Sea God continent were shocked. However, they didn't know what the Golden Celestial Position was. Amber was the most powerful talent of the Sea God continent throughout history. And even she could only be ranked on the 2nd row, which was probably equivalent to the 2nd grade. However, Zen was ranked above the 1st grade, meaning his talent was at least 2 grades higher than Amber's. The warriors of the celestial position had more clarity on the rankings of the talent tablet than anyone else. The ranking system consisted of 3 tiers, represented by 3 colors: golden, silver, bronze. There were various titles under each color. Although there wasn't much of a difference between 2 titles of the same color, there was a huge gap between the lowest title and highest one. Celestial Position was the topmost title. Golden Celestial Position. Wow, it really is that position. Ever since Eliza became the Supreme Lord 400,000 years ago, there hasn't been anyone who has obtained the Golden Celestial Position title, Max muttered. 400,000 years might sound like a long time, but actually it was a very short time frame, if one considered the intervals between the appearances of two golden celestial position titles. Judging from the measure of time, an era lasted for 3.6 billion years, and during this era, only 6 warriors had obtained the title of golden celestial position. The warrior who had obtained the golden celestial position before Eliza obtained it tens of millions of years ago, or even hundreds of millions of years ago. This time span was beyond imagination. Dorothea's face wore a smug expression now. She hadn't done anything to harm Zen before, which was indeed the right decision on her part. She giggled and said to Woody, "Didn't someone make a bet with me?" Woody looked pale. He was a serious man. His puppet didn't have blood vessels, so it couldn't blush in embarrassment. However, his real form, which was controlling the puppet in the heavenly feather sacred place, had turned red in the face. Of course, he was not really going to swallow the black nether saber. But he didn't know what to say to save his face. Max didn't care about this silly bet between Woody and Dorothea. He suddenly remembered something very important. Chapter 928, titled as Asura. Any life and death realm warrior was bound to undergo the first small heavenly tribulation before they reached the realm. Almost everyone who could obtain a title on the talent tablet would manage to do one thing during the tribulation for sure: activate their lotus flowers. What Max did not know was that Zen had undergone his small heavenly tribulation at the Feather Emperor Island. At that time, the group of Spirit Supreme Realm warriors from the Celestial Position race were still in the Heavenly Stellar Sacred Place and trying to figure out a way to lure out the evil dragon. Obviously, they knew nothing about what had happened back then and just how far Zen had gone. It was only now that this crucial question finally crossed Max's mind. He knew that almost all titled warriors could summon a lotus flower. What he was curious about was the kind of lotus flower that had appeared during Zen's first small heavenly tribulation. Was it a 3-petal lotus flower? A 5-petal one? Or perhaps a 7-petal one? 9-petal? The golden celestial position title was already extremely rare and extraordinary, which meant that although it would have been Zen's first time going through a heavenly tribulation, he was very likely to have summoned a 7-petal or a 9-petal lotus flower. Even a Mahayana lotus flower wasn't out of the question either. Zen, when you went through the small heavenly tribulation, did a lotus flower appear in the sky? Max finally couldn't hold off and inquired in a low voice. There was a trace of respect in his voice. His attitude towards Zen had completely changed now. Truth be told, that was because he was very clear on what it meant for the Celestial Position race to find a golden Celestial Position warrior in this world. As an expert at the Spirit Supreme Realm, he was much stronger than Zen at present. However, the latter was like a seed with unlimited potential. His future showed promise, and that was enough for Max to respect this guy. Even the arrogance of Delroy had been swept away now. A truth that he never would have believed had just been proven correct right in front of him, and he now knew one thing: there was nothing he had that gave him a right to be proud in front of Zen. All warriors from the Celestial Position race focused their eyes on Zen's face, waiting for him to answer Max's question. They had been curious about this too. Zen hesitated for a moment when he saw so many eyes focused on him. Then he replied, "Yes. It did." "How many petals? How many petals did your lotus flower have?" Delroy was even more curious than Max and forgot all about his arrogance. It was hard to explain just how the lotus flower and its petals were linked to one's talents. The more petals it had, the greater was one's possibility of surpassing the heaven. And talent had an effect on a warrior's cultivation speed, which increased with talent. Yet there was, for sure, a link between the lotus flower and the talent. People with low talents were usually unable to summon a lotus flower, and those with higher talents usually managed to conjure up a flower with more petals than those with lesser talents. Zen asked with a smile, "How many petals did your lotus flower have?" "You want to know about me first?" Max was surprised. That was a strange way to answer a question, by asking the same thing himself. He smiled and replied, "After stepping into the Spirit Supreme Realm, I made my lotus flower reveal 7 petals. A 7-petal lotus flower was rare enough in his eyes. Even if there were many geniuses in the Celestial Position race, very few warriors could have achieved that. Most were unable to surpass 5. Following Max, Delroy also said, "I summoned a 5-petal lotus flower during my last heavenly tribulation." Dorothea smiled sweetly. "My lotus flower also had 5 petals. She hadn't obtained a title on the talent tablet, and her talent was lower than Max's and Delroy's, but thanks to her efforts, she had still managed to summon a 5-petal lotus flower." Well, Zen nodded his head. It was kind of embarrassing to tell about his own flower now, During my heavenly tribulation, my lotus flower revealed 35 petals in total. 35. Woody's voice choked with astonishment and he almost screamed. Delroy and Dorothea also widened their eyes in shock. 35. That was truly beyond their imagination. A 7 or 9 petal flower would have already been far-fetched. But 35. Max, however, remained calm. He knew that the golden celestial position title meant that everything about Zen was already far beyond their imagination. He commented in a faint voice, so it was a Mahayana lotus flower then. With one more petal, it would have been a perfect lotus. What happens if one creates a perfect lotus? Zen asked. Max chuckled and replied, you will know it when you activate the last petal. As they were discussing about the lotus flower, their ears picked up a ruckus beside the talent tablet. Something was happening. The puppets they controlled were now on the 10th floor. Although they were already incompatible and eye-catching, the creatures within the 10th floor seemed to be more curious about the warrior who had been tested for his talent in the talent tablet anyway. They looked past the crowd and saw the door into the talent tablet open from inside. A young human walked out gracefully, calm and composed of himself despite the ruckus that most probably, he himself had caused. He had an ordinary appearance, and he only possessed the cultivation base of a 10th level war general. However, his expression was full of confidence and there was some air around him that made him the center of attention. At the same time, the words on the talent tablet began to change. A layer of faint silver luster enveloped the wall and eventually dissolved away to morph the word, Asura. Asura, Klein Zhao. The letters appeared right below Zen's name. What? How did Klein manage to achieve that? I never expected that he would have such amazing talent. He has already surpassed everyone on the first row and ranks only behind Zen. Doesn't this mean that Klein's talent is second only to Zen's? Oh my goodness, what is going on with the human race these days? 2 of their members with such enormous power have appeared in less than a year. The rise of the human race is inevitable now. They're gonna take over things slowly. I heard that Miguel has already led his forces towards the 2 sacred places of the ogres. Most likely, both of those sacred places have already been destroyed. Delroy, Max, Woody, Dorothea and the rest were also staring at the new name on the talent tablet. Their faces were filled with astonishment and they were silent amidst the discussion. After a long while, Delroy finally broke that silence. What man? This world is too strange for me to handle. The Silver Asura title. In terms of what the talent tablet had to say, this young man called Klein had already surpassed these 7 people of the celestial position race. Max was the most powerful among them all and had only gotten a silver title till now, that too of a very low rank. In the entire celestial position race, very few people had ever managed to obtain a golden title, and those who had ever managed to achieve a silver title could also be counted on the hands. Anyone who was blessed enough to do so was powerful enough to become a core member of the celestial position race and would be highly valued. That was the main reason why Max was known as the leader of their team. It was already astonishing enough that a genius like Zen had appeared in the lower world, but now another human with a Silver Asura title was standing in front of them. These 7 celestial position race warriors were all overwhelmed with astonishment. After the young and talented Klein came out, unaware of the astonishment he had bestowed upon 7 certain people, several top-level warlords of the human race also descended from the higher floors. Today, the human race's position in the Tower of Sin was completely different from what it had been when Zen had come here last time. The human race and the demon knight race had jointly become the controllers of the Tower of Sin. No other races were able to fight against them now. Klein seemed ecstatic, surrounded by the crowd, and cheered on continuously. He was very confident in himself, and was equally satisfied to be able to surpass the first row and obtain a title. He was humble too. Surpassing Zen was something that he would never even imagine or dream of. In fact, although Zen had left the Sea God continent a long time ago, he had already become a legendary figure in the Purple Heart sacred place. Nobody was arrogant enough to think that he or she could surpass a legendary figure like him. At this moment, Max ordered his puppet to walk towards Klein's direction. A hint of doubt appeared on Klein's face. He had just walked out of the talent tablet and had not noticed these 8 strange guests who had strangely appeared on the 10th floor. Although they looked human outwardly, he could only feel their soul waves. There were no breaths or signs of life. The top-level warlords of the human race also stared at them warily. They had already gone on high alert upon seeing these unknown guests in the Tower of Sin, but since they were all attracted by Klein's test result, they hadn't bothered to deal with them till now. Suddenly, someone with hawk's eyes noticed Zen, who was standing a few feet away from Max and everyone else. Zen, hey, it's Zen, I can't even believe my eyes. Zen has returned to the sea god continent. Just as they were about to cheer on, someone noticed it. Wait, there's something wrong with him. Although this guy looks like Zen, he doesn't seem human at all. That's because it's just a puppet. What motives do you have for pretending to be Zen? The sea god continent only had a few crude puppets. Nobody there was talented enough to create a puppet as vivid as Hank's. The one he had made for Zen looked almost like Zen himself. However, there was obviously a difference between a real person and a puppet. And warriors who were powerful enough could detect that something was wrong with just a slight sweep of their perception. Just as everyone was feeling puzzled and cautious, a young girl, wearing a colorful dress, descended from the top of the stairs. Everyone heard her cold voice ring out, "That is exactly the Zen you know, but it seems like his cultivation base has reached the level of a war sage, and therefore, he has to send in a puppet to enter the cursed land. This puppet technique looks like it has been inherited from the celestial position race. Am I right? And these 7 people with him? You all are from the celestial position race, right?" Chapter 929, A Man Without Destiny. Actually, Max wanted to say something to Klein. According to celestial position conventions and rules, all warriors who managed to receive a title from the talent tablet would be invited to join. That was regardless of race. Now that Klein had obtained the Silver Asura title, Max was naturally going to invite him to join his clan, especially considering the fact that the former's title was better than his own. Amber would also have been invited, but she was only able to get a spot in the second row of the talent tablet. Although this was considered as one of the top results in the Sea God continent, in the eyes of the celestial position, this was barely qualifying. The second row of the talent tablet was the lowest level of the celestial position. However, before Max could even open his mouth, the human girl had already spoken and inferred their origins. She had been able to learn of that through a single glance, and that spoke to her powers. Max, Delroy and the others immediately became alert when they heard her say that. Zen's cursory gaze swept over them and then met Yolanda's. A faint smile surfaced on his face. Yolanda also nodded her head towards Zen and smiled in return. She then continued, "Klein is from the Purple Heart Sacred Place. He belongs with the humans who will give him an important position once he flies into the upper world. I recommend that the celestial position does not do anything to interfere." Hearing Yolanda's words, Delroy and his clansmen frowned. This wasn't something they wanted. Now that they had confirmed Zen's talent, and in the process, accidentally discovered another one, they weren't going to let the two of them go so easily. They would try their best to win over Zen and Klein. Max coldly asked, "And who are you? Which group of the human race are you from?" "That's irrelevant." Yolanda shook her head and continued in her usual, calm voice, "I'm just here to tell you that we won't let you take Klein away." Delroy gave a cold snort. "Whatever. The flying passage in the Great World has already collapsed. If we don't take him to the upper world with us, he will only get confined to this world for the rest of his life. Don't worry about that. It's not going to be difficult to repair the flying passage." Yolanda shook her head. Max took 2 steps forward and sized up Yolanda with a sweep of his gaze before threatening, "You have just reached the virtual tribulation realm. How can you stop us?" Yolanda's gaze was still indifferent. "You're just a bunch of guys at the Spirit Supreme realm. Why can't I stop you?" At her words, 7 pairs of eyes of the celestial position stared speechlessly at each other. How could this mysterious human girl actually tell their cultivation level? She had done that with only a part of her soul. Who on earth was she? Seeing the expressions of utter embarrassment on their face, Yolanda put up her rare smile. "You know what? Klein may not be destined to join your clan, and I will fight for him. But Zen, well, he has his fate under his own control. If he's willing to join you, I won't stop him." When Zen had obtained the heavenly fragment, Yolanda had told him that she would not interfere with his decisions now. Whatever he wanted to do, she would let him and support him. "What do you mean?" What Yolanda said left Max and his clansmen perplexed. They could give up on Klein, of course. Although very few warriors could have obtained the Silver Asura title, there was still a huge gap between it and the gold celestial position. Zen was also a human. Why was this mysterious woman choosing Klein over Zen? They couldn't figure out the reason. Seeing the perplexed expressions on the 7 faces in front of her, Yolanda explained faintly, "I don't need to tell you everything. I only need you to know that although Zen may seem to be able to lead the world of chaos, he is a man without destiny." A man without destiny? Hearing Yolanda's words only made them even more confused. Dorothea, Woody and other people of the celestial position also looked confused. Delroy seemed to have understood something, if not everything. His face was filled with shock. "A person without destiny? Did you just say that Zen is a person without destiny?" He was shaking his head as if the idea was too hard to swallow. Zen also had a strange expression on his face. He didn't know what that meant either. A man without destiny, what did that mean? Yolanda gently turned around. This is not a good place to talk about this. Let's go to the living area. Everyone followed Yolanda and left the talent tablet. Several martial artists were quietly having a conversation amongst themselves. Yolanda had just said that these people were from the celestial position. Although the Tower of Crystal was known as the Tower of Sin on the Sea God continent, they had learned something interesting from a book that was stored on top of the Tower of Sin. It was said that the tower belonged to the celestial position. All the top-level warlords could read the book, so it was not a secret. What does that mean? Are these people at the Spirit Supreme realm? Are they even stronger than the mighty warriors at the Soul Sea realm? So the celestial position really is the original owner of the Tower of Sin. Have they come here to take the tower away? Many of the creatures on the 10th floor immediately tensed up when they heard these words. The Tower of Sin was far too important for the Sea God continent to give up. Where would they practice and level up without it? The Sea God continent had always been in chaos, and had originally been a piece of savage land. If it wasn't for the Tower of Sin, it wouldn't have been able to match up to even the Central region, let alone the Divine Kingdom continent. Now that the crowd had heard that the celestial position had come to the Tower of Sin, how could they not be nervous? Did Zen bring them here? This is too much for me to bear. In the early days, Zen had also obtained a number of benefits from the tower. Although Don't spout nonsense. Zen is different from you. He has his own plans for what he's going to do and we never know what's going on in his mind. Almost everyone had entered into an endless argument now. Yolanda on the other hand had already reached and sat down in the living area. The wooden clogs hanging from her feet lightly knocked on the floor, letting out a crisp sound. What does a man without destiny mean? Woody asked Delroy curiously. Delroy frowned as he thought about how to explain it. In the Great Realm Pavilion of our clan, I read a book titled, About Destiny, which records a bizarre doctrine. According to the book, everything in the universe is predestined. Our destiny has been firmly fixed, and we are forced to follow it without any deviation. We can't make our own decisions. Every smile, word, step, and thought has been arranged. What's left is just a meaningless rehearsal, Yolanda continued. Dorothea puffed her cheeks and shook her head. I still don't understand. I am here, I do what I want to do. It's normal if you don't understand. Actually, you're not supposed to. Delroy replied expressionlessly. He then stood up and glanced at a wooden tray placed on a nearby stone table. He grabbed the wooden tray and asked, if I let this go, what will happen? Well, that's obvious. The tray will fall down on the ground, Dorothea replied. She couldn't understand why Delroy would ask something like that. Delroy nodded and released his grip. The wooden tray in his hand fell to the ground, producing a crisp sound. See, you predicted that the tray would fall down. Come on, Dorothea chuckled. Everybody knew that would happen. Delroy continued, you knew that I would let the tray go. You knew the height of the tray and the speed and place of its fall, so you predicted what would happen. Yeah, that's common sense. Dorothea nodded. She felt Delroy's words were getting more and more mysterious. What if, Delroy was becoming more and more passionate, what if someone was able to predict everything that would happen in a span of all 3.6 billion years in this era, because he has already witnessed the birth of the era? He asked. But that is simply impossible. Woody could not hold it in any longer. He stared at Delroy and burst out, can you predict what I will do next? No, and the era lasts 3.6 billion years. Countless creatures live in this universe. I know that some powerhouses in our clan are capable of predicting the future, but they can only peek a tiny bit into the primordial chaos. You know this better than I do, Delroy. This is impossible. Seeing how passionate Woody looked, Yolanda, who was kicking her clogs slowly postulated, what if it's not a person but the heaven itself? Delroy nodded. The heaven has deduced everything. The birth and death of every creature has long been decided. Everything is predestined, including me standing here and saying these words. The heaven. Woody was somewhat baffled. Just then, Yolanda turned towards Zen and asked, now do you understand what a man without destiny means? Chapter 930. Activate the Tower of Crystal. The entire Grand Era had been initiated by the heavenly law. Because of that, the heavenly law knew the fate of everyone living in the worlds like the back of its hand. It also meant that it was in control of everything, how and when a person would come into and leave the world, when would he or she laugh, when would he or she cry. However, there would always be accidents that would create exceptions from this rule. Throughout time, there were people who had fates that were not under the control of the heavenly law. In other words, the heavenly law could not calculate and foresee when and how these people would be born, and it had no idea how their fates would play out in the future. Zen looked extremely stunned. Even the cyan dragon in his mind was caught off guard, and couldn't do anything but sigh. Alas, I never thought that I would ever feel inferior to this human girl. Zen, even the heavenly law doesn't know anything about your future. Yolanda slowly stood up and said, that's why I hadn't tried to change Zen's mind when he appeared and obtained the golden title of celestial position. As for you, people from the celestial position race, if you decided to persuade Zen to join you, I will not intervene. However, you cannot do anything to Klein, who just obtained the silver title of Asura. The 7 members of the celestial position race were all silent. In their eyes, Zen had already become an anomaly. Max turned to look at Zen and asked, are you willing to join our celestial position race? He believed that regardless of whether the heavenly law could tell Zen's fate or not, since Zen had the golden title of celestial position, they could not afford to let him go. If they did, the celestial position's upper echelons would find out, and it would mean a huge trouble for all of them. Zen thought for a moment, his thick brows furrowed. He then smiled and said, I don't seem to have any other choice. Woody sneered, it seems like you have a clear estimation of yourself and your abilities. Well, no one could see through my fate, Zen replied, smiling. Joining the celestial position race doesn't sound like a bad thing, but I have a request. With that, the expression on his face suddenly changed. What request? Max asked. I need you to keep the Tower of Crystal on the Sea God continent for 500 years. Zen had his mind made up since the very beginning. The tower was extremely important to the many races that resided on the Sea God continent, especially the humans and the Demon Knight. Even though the threat from the Flaming Ogre Sacred Place and the Dread Ogre Sacred Place would probably disappear in the near future, the Purple Heart Sacred Place hadn't fully developed yet. If he let the celestial position members take away the tower, it wouldn't affect the Demon Knight much, but for the Purple Heart Sacred Place, it would still be a big problem. 500 years, Max repeated, pondering for a moment. No matter how they looked at it, the deal was extremely worthwhile. They could easily convince Zen to join the celestial position race without having to spend too much effort if they agreed with it. Delroy, however, seemed to have another plan. 300 years. He firmly said, right now, the Tower of Crystal only displays half of its original capabilities. We can help you activate the entire tower. After that, the lucky light will have greater effect, and the number of its floors could easily reach up to 30. Activate the entire tower? Zen asked, his eyes suddenly lighting up. Delroy nodded. Actually, the 3 trial towers of the celestial position race all had 30 floors. But only 15 floors of the Tower of Crystal in front of them had been activated. Zen appreciated the plan Delroy put forward, but he shook his head. Forget about that. In the Tower of Crystal, warriors can only cultivate up to top-level warlords. Even if you help them activate the entire tower, it would not really change anything. The Tower of Crystal was located in the middle of the cursed land. They could only become top-level warlords, because if they exceeded that limit, they would be affected by the curse. Therefore, activating the entire tower would be useless. This problem is easy to solve. We can just set up a transmission array inside the Tower of Crystal, said Delroy. Zen shook his head again. The Tower of Crystal will absorb everything. Transmission arrays will also be absorbed. At this, Delroy smiled proudly. The transmission array that you set up will naturally be absorbed. But the one we will set up will not. These words amazed Zen. If they could really set up a transmission array that wouldn't be absorbed by the Tower of Crystal, then War Sages and Soul Sea Realm Masters would be able to freely enter and leave the tower. As long as they didn't stay inside the tower for more than a month, they wouldn't be afflicted by the curse. Zen looked at Yolanda and asked, are Fabian and Jared still at the bottom of the tower? Yolanda nodded. That's right. After becoming War Sages, they have been training there intensively. It seems that they will be able to see the light of day again, Zen humored, chuckling. Call them over first. If what Delroy was saying was true, then they wouldn't have to stay at the bottom of the tower any longer. On that note, Zen and the people from the celestial position race knew that they had reached an agreement. Yolanda promptly sent a message to the seat owners of the human race and the Demon Knight, telling them to evacuate all creatures from the Tower of Sin. Leave the Tower of Sin? What does that mean? Are the celestial position warriors really taking the Tower of Sin away? What the heck? I just became a level 8 war general. I never thought that the Tower of Sin would be taken away, especially at this time. Why do I have such bad luck? Creatures from many different races were immediately displeased upon hearing the news. With anger on their faces, they all began shouting, airing their opposition. Yolanda, however, couldn't be bothered to explain anything to them when she and the celestial position warriors arrived at the top of the Tower of Sin. They invited Fabian and Jared, the two human war sages, from the bottom of the tower. Upon seeing Zen, they became pleasantly surprised. Then, when they learned that the people beside Zen would actually be helping them set up a transmission array, the two became even more ecstatic. At that point, their minds became so much at ease. Although they could return to the tower from time to time, it was still very boring to spend most of their time at the bottom of the tower. It always made them feel depressed at the thought of how they would never be able to leave the cursed land in their lifetimes as they were trapped in the dark nether cave in this small tower. But once the transmission array was built, they could return to the Purple Heart sacred place at their own will. It was indeed something to celebrate and be happy about. On the cursed land, the creatures from various races were densely packed around the Tower of Sin. As they stared at the tower in front of them, many of them had unwilling expressions on their faces. Aren't those people too overbearing? How can they take the tower away just like that? The Tower of Sin belongs to the Sea God continent. Although I am also very unwilling, according to the legends, this tower does belong to the celestial position race. Taking something that belongs to them could not be considered as overbearing, right? But then again, so what if we are unwilling? Have you heard? Those people are at the Spirit Supreme Realm. Do you know what the Spirit Supreme Realm is? It is a realm even higher than the Soul Sea Realm. They could destroy our sacred places with a snap of their fingers. Actually, even the guy himself didn't know what the Spirit Supreme Realm was. He only knew that the Spirit Supreme Realm warriors were much more powerful than the Soul Sea Realm ones. Under the gaze of many creatures, the entire Tower of Sin suddenly began to shake violently. Boom! The buildings in the surrounding villages began to shake as well. It was as if there was a small earthquake. Some of the weaker houses even collapsed in the middle of what was happening. Will they make the Tower of Sin fly away? Someone muttered. Under the constant tremors, the tail of the Tower of Sin began to stretch continuously. The giant tower then started to act like a living being. With this extension, it grew taller in front of everyone's eyes. The tower's first floor quickly rose into the air. The two giant warriors guarding the door could only stand on the ground in a daze. Flying was prohibited within the cursed land, so no matter what happened, no one dared to fly. The tremor lasted for about an hour. After that, the section of the tower that was above the ground had significantly elongated, reaching a height of 16 floors. As for the underground section, it maintained a height of 14 floors. Delroy fulfilled his promise and fully activated the Tower of Sin. Chapter 931. Going back to the central region. When the tremor stopped, many of the creatures were still in a daze, doubt etched on their faces. It stopped just like that. What is going on? Weren't the celestial position warriors taking the Tower of Sin away? Is this happening because they don't have the strength to take it away? Maybe. After quite a few minutes of speculation, they finally understood that the Tower of Sin hadn't been taken away, and that the tower was now in its complete form. But in this process, they had learned an important piece of information: the Tower of Sin could exist on the Sea God continent for only 300 years. The celestial position members would take it away after the period was up. Creatures on the Sea God continent were both relieved and worried at the news. The fact that the celestial position race was willing to give them a buffer was already a great favor. It was said that this buffer period had been granted because Zen had agreed to certain conditions of the celestial position race. What was more, the celestial position warriors had set up 2 transmission arrays in the Tower of Sin. One was connected to the Purple Heart sacred place, and the other to the Heavenly Feather sacred place. This way the Demon Knight and human race could have greater control over the Tower of Sin. After all, once the warlords of the other races became war sages, they would have to use one of these transmission arrays to go between the tower and the outside world if they wanted to continue cultivating in the tower. Once the 8-diagram wheel had flown back to the Heavenly Feather sacred place, Zen pulled his soul out of his puppet. He smiled as he looked at it, an almost exact replica of himself. He said to Hank, "Can I keep this puppet?" "No problem," Hank said with a laugh. Hank might not be the strongest among the 7 people of the celestial position race, but he knew a lot of things. He spoke rarely, but his straightforward character had impressed Zen. Zen put the puppet, an incredible likeness of a virtual tribulation realm warrior, into his space ring. The celestial position warriors had had only one purpose in coming to the Sea God continent: to take away the Tower of Crystal. But once it was confirmed that Zen had actually obtained the golden title of celestial position, he had helped the Sea God continent warriors ask a great favor of the celestial position race. That was not to say that Zen was against joining the celestial position race. Although Brianna had called this race a crazy one, they were still a neutral force compared to the other forces in the universe. Plus, he had to wait until after he ascended to the upper world to become a member of the celestial position race. And since he had just entered the life and death realm, nobody knew when he would ascend to the upper world. They'd been on the sea god continent for more than a month. Compared to when they'd arrived, the celestial position warriors were more patient now and did not have much to worry about. Once Zen had managed to persuade them, the 7 of them had a rare tour of the sea god continent. And Zen had chosen to stay for a month on this continent because of Amber. In the beginning, Amber had wanted to squeeze out the life energy from the holy tree and pour it into Lavender's soul. The holy tree had already been severely injured, which was why Zen refused. But in the next few days, the heavenly feather sacred place displayed great vitality, changing with every passing day. The originally messy sacred place transformed such that all the plants began to grow crazily. The surface of the holy tree had also recovered quite a bit. Following Amber's repeated requests, Zen finally agreed to stay in the sacred place. A month later, when the holy tree had replenished a portion of its life energy, Zen finally handed the soul-nurturing wood to Amber. But Zen was a lot more careful this time. He had broken the statue of Queen of Punishment, but the Demon Knight members had erected another statue in the blink of an eye. He was afraid that that evil woman would control the Demon Knight members to attack Lavender again. And now, only Amber and Zen remained at the top of the holy tree. The tree began to shake slightly, a vigorous life energy starting to gather along its branches. The life energy extracted from the holy tree this time was far less than what it was the last time. But once the life energy was poured into the soul-nurturing wood, Zen's perception also entered the wood to examine Lavender's situation. He could feel that she was much better now. She hadn't yet woken up and was still in a deep sleep, but she would eventually wake up. But it wouldn't be easy if he wanted to control the sword spirit within his body to fight like he had in the past. After dealing with this, Zen and the celestial position warriors would return to the central region. But this time, Max and the rest did not use the 8-diagram wheel. They merely stood on a branch of the holy tree and asked Zen to join them. "Aren't we going to use the 8-diagram wheel to go back?" Zen asked. Delroy smiled and said, "There's no need. We have left a transportation imprint in the central region, so we don't need to travel across the sea." It was not until then that Zen remembered that they had left a blood-red cross mark in the heavenly stellar palace. They had also left a similar mark in front of the cemetery on the Divine Emperor Island. Such a mark ensured that they could easily travel to the place it was left in. "Wow, this is really convenient," Zen thought to himself and went to stand beside them. Soon after, a blood-red flag appeared in Hank's hand, pulsing with a strong power of space. He waved the flag gently, and a blood-red belt of light began to float around them. Soon enough, a powerful gravitational force began pulling at Zen. "Don't resist this power," said Dorothea from beside him. Zen nodded, and the force pulled him into a transportation channel. He didn't know how the celestial position warriors had managed to travel to a place so far away in such a short time. Zen usually used a large-scale transmission array, and even with that, it would take him a long time to reach his destination. When Zen had traveled from Immortal Mist Celestial Tomb to the Sea God continent, he had been severely injured during the transportation. This had happened upon his return from the Sea God continent as well. But it took them only about 30 seconds to return to the central region through this transportation channel, one that seemed amazingly stable. A light began to flash from the blood-red cross mark before the heavenly stellar palace in Oracle City. Zen and the 7 members of Celestial Position race appeared in this light. The Celestial Position warriors did not stay in the central region for long. Max told Zen that they would report to the upper echelons of their race about Zen, and others would take over. After that, they would continue to deal with the evil dragon. Minutes later, they activated the transmission imprint on the Divine Emperor Island and headed towards the continent. As he watched the Celestial Position warriors disappear, Zen thought, "I think the Celestial Position race has a dispute with Master Derek and Marine." But he merely shrugged since it had nothing to do with him. He suddenly felt a sense of relaxation spread through his entire body. From the moment he had begun cultivating, time had been like a giant rock pressing against him, constantly pushing him forward. There were still things that he had to do, like helping Lavender recover her status and finding his sister. But these were still far beyond his reach, and he couldn't accomplish them in a short period of time. For example, the young man who had taken Yan away was unimaginably stronger than Zen. Even now, with his current strength, Zen had no doubt that that young man could kill him 1,000 times over with just a single glance. Even this great world might not be able to withstand his attack. So this was a rare moment of relaxation for Zen. He took a look around the heavenly stellar palace. The hall was already empty. Letitia should have returned to the Cloud Hall once she had recovered. Would Margaret have followed Letitia back to the Cloud Hall? He thought. Just as he thought this, he saw a hefty guy flying over. It was Dylan, one of the 3 leaders of the World Commercial Alliance. The moment he saw Zen, Dylan broke out in a sweat as he shouted, "Zen, you're finally back. Something terrible has happened. They're fighting." Zen was curious. They're fighting? Who? Chapter 932, The Unexpected Dispute. It had been quite a while since Dylan had constantly watched the heavenly stellar palace. When he heard that Zen had finally returned, he immediately rushed over to meet him. Meanwhile, Zen was confused when he saw Dylan's anxious expression. What was he about to hear this time? A few puffs of air escaped Dylan's lips before he relaxed, and told Zen everything. After that, Zen suddenly realized that Margaret and Letitia had fought again. What was their fight about now? It was known that Margaret's and Letitia's cultivation bases were far from each other. Letitia was a life and death realm master, while Margaret was only at the internal elixir realm. The virtual tribulation realm lay between those 2 cultivation bases, so they clearly weren't at the same level. However, Margaret's strength wasn't easily measured. She wasn't just an ordinary warrior, since she relied not on her own strength but on the Purple Power World's assistance from beginning to the end. As of now in the entire central region, Zen had both killed Eddie and Simon. Other than a few independent warriors who had yet to appear, Letitia and Margaret were probably the strongest and most powerful. If those 2 fought, a highly intense battle might ensue. It wasn't long after Zen had destroyed the heavenly evil sect that he had brutally killed Simon. The few members of the heavenly evil sect who wanted to revive their sect were finally defeated, and the entire central region gradually became stable. The rebuilding of the ethereal spirit sect and the ethereal city also progressed slowly but orderly. The other sects also developed steadily, and the same could be said for the Cloud Hall and the World Commercial Alliance. On the other hand, the warriors had fewer and fewer things to talk about. Then suddenly, the battle between Margaret and Letitia became a hot topic in the central region, and it spread quickly like wildfire. Before, the warriors who loved to guess and gossip believed that Letitia and Zen were romantically involved. While most warriors knew about the relationship between Margaret, the young lady of the She clan, and Zen, they didn't know that it was she who had summoned the numerous swords that had killed the people of the heavenly evil sect that day. Currently, the argument between the 2 women had escalated into a fight. Such news had of course, spread quickly. When news of it had spread, many began to feel jealous of Zen. Aside from Margaret being Xander's granddaughter, Letitia attracted many warriors in the central region. However, Letitia always looked aloof on the exterior and had a high position and cultivation base. Thus, ordinary warriors were inferior to her. Most warriors who fancied her could only admire her in secret, and had no chances of getting close to her. But Zen had these 2 women infatuated with him, and even fight each other for him. Of course, many warriors who saw that were envious. Some of them even felt that they couldn't accept this fact. However, this was all due to Zen's negligence. He had left the Luo clan at 16, and had constantly practiced martial arts ever since. He had several years of experience and became a young man in his 20s, and had made great achievements in the field of martial arts that were impossible for other warriors of the lower world to make. But, he didn't know much about love and had no idea how to deal with his relationships with women. While Margaret's personality had greatly changed and she was obedient towards Zen, she was still a person who refused to admit defeat. Even if she was willing to take care of Letitia when the latter was asleep, it didn't mean that Margaret would give in. On the contrary, she only cared about Zen. She could give up or sacrifice other things, but never on Zen. She would always fight for him. As for Letitia, the powerful, noble, and respected lady since her youth, she was in control of the Cloud Hall at a young age. Zen had once been a disciple of the Cloud Hall, and she was older than him. Although a warrior's lifespan was long and being a few years older didn't mean much, Letitia was more reserved and mature when it came to affection. But Letitia was someone who pursued perfection. Even if she was immersed in martial arts and didn't get to choose a life partner, women's fantasies about love were still perfectly magnificent. But she couldn't tolerate it if there was a single flaw in the love. It was like a black dot that marred a perfectly smooth jade. The most troublesome thing was after Zen had hurried back and awakened Letitia, he left in a hurry. He didn't arrange properly for that matter. After Zen had left, the air between the two women had changed drastically. Although they didn't argue, they clearly didn't get along at all. Dylan and the others had noticed it. To add to the troubles, Letitia didn't immediately return to the Cloud Hall, and waited for Zen all the time in the World Commercial Alliance instead. At that point, Imogen, who had gone overseas, had returned. All the life and death realm warriors were fully prepared for life and death crises in advance. Then again, it wasn't easy to undergo the life and death crisis. Thus, the life and death realm warriors seized every moment of chance and used every method they had to pass through the tribulation. At that time, Imogen knew that she wouldn't be able to undergo the second life and death crisis due to her old age and declining strength. In that case, she only had one way left, which was to go overseas and search for opportunities. In fact, warriors in the Central Region and the War Kings and War Emperors of the four Divine Kingdoms alike would all choose to go overseas to look for opportunities. However, it wasn't easy to look for those overseas opportunities. In most cases, the warriors who were almost at the end of their lives never returned. They most likely died in an unknown sea in the Great World. Therefore, Letitia clearly knew what it meant when Imogen left for overseas at that time. Yet, she never expected to receive a voice message from Imogen in her own message rune upon checking it when she woke up. Imogen had already returned to the Central Region and had rushed back to Oracle City. Naturally, Letitia was ecstatic. Now that her master, Imogen, hadn't died overseas, it meant that she might have passed the second life and death crisis. Putting aside the fact that her master's strength had greatly increased, Letitia would be the happiest as long as her master survived in this world. After all, Imogen had already become Letitia's only family after her entire family had been exterminated. The three leaders of the World Commercial Alliance were also overjoyed when they heard the news. They even organized a banquet for Imogen's return. Not a lot of warriors were invited to the banquet, but the leaders of the fourth grade sects in the Central Region as well as Xander and the other warriors, who were busy rebuilding the ethereal spirit sect, would join the banquet. When Imogen learned that so much had happened since she left the Central Region, she sighed. Luckily, the heavenly evil sect had been destroyed and peace and harmony were restored in the Central Region. There was currently nothing to worry about. However, Xander had mentioned his great-granddaughter, Margaret, to Imogen during the banquet. He politely expressed that if Margaret would marry Zen of the Cloud Hall in the future, he and Imogen would become relatives by marriage. Imogen was in a good mood when she had known that Zen, who was quite powerful, had killed Eddie and even found some super masters to kill the masters of the Divine Kingdoms. But when she heard Xander mention Margaret so suddenly, she was surprised and her expression quickly changed. She turned around to look for Letitia and saw the younger woman with an unreadable face. At that moment, Imogen, who was known for her violent temper, got furious. She knew that Letitia liked Zen. Before, she didn't think that Zen was good enough to deserve her most outstanding disciple, but now it seemed that the two of them were a perfect match. One was the leader of the Cloud Hall, the strongest sect in the Central Region, and the other one was the strongest warrior in the Central Region. They were definitely made for each other, but why did Margaret suddenly appear to meddle in their relationship? She is just a nobody. How could she even deserve to marry a powerful warrior like Zen? Everyone present were all reputable figures. Although the ethereal spirit sect was under reconstruction, Xander wasn't easy to deal with. It was only a matter of time before the ethereal spirit sect would be powerful and prosperous just like before. Xander pulled a long face upon hearing Imogen. He was quite fond of Margaret, so how could he tolerate such insults towards her? Thus, the two of them began to quarrel and tension quickly filled the atmosphere. Meanwhile, Dylan, Hobbs, and the rest looked worried. They regretted holding such a banquet. No one expected that such a small matter would cause a commotion. If only Xander and Imogen argued, then this matter would be over. And everything would have to be discussed after Zen returned. But when Brent saw his sister being insulted like that, he was unhappy and thus spoke out in Margaret's defense. Soon enough, Letitia and Margaret themselves got involved, and the ruckus had gotten worse. Chapter 933, An Appointment for a Fight. Letitia quietly sat in her seat, seemingly detached from all that was happening around her. However, Imogen continuously attacked Margaret verbally and the argument had now taken a nasty turn. Margaret had initially been very obedient and silent when she was with Zen, but the insults thrown at her right now were too much. Imogen might be a life and death realm master, but Margaret felt no fear. She had her great-grandfather beside her, after all. Master Imogen, you said I'm not worthy of Zen, but so what? She said stubbornly. Although Zen and I haven't officially gotten married, we've already done everything that a wife and husband are supposed to do. Her words plunged the entire hall into an uncomfortable silence. A cup of top-grade, 100-year-old wine sat untouched in front of Letitia, but the moment Margaret spoke, she extended her jade-like fingers and downed the alcohol in one gulp. Her cultivation assured her that she would never get drunk, but the strong taste still made her face flush. Shameless, she muttered coldly. Sex was not a taboo subject in the martial arts world, but the way Margaret boldly announced it to the entire Cloud Hall was a bit crass and insensitive. Letitia's remark made Xander fly into a rage. How can you speak like that? Of course, Imogen wasn't just going to let an outsider chide Letitia in their own territory. Not long after, the silence had once again plunged into a chaos of sharp words and nasty arguments. Not even Dylan, who was an exceptional mediator, could settle the two parties' differences. This confrontation went on for quite a long time before ending with Margaret issuing a challenge to Letitia for a fight. The location of the fight is in Cloudy City, Zen asked after Dylan told him the whole story. Dylan nodded with certainty. Yes. It's in Cloudy City. The moment Dylan confirmed the location, Zen was already on the move and immediately dashed towards the portal to Cloudy City. From the perspective of the World Commercial Alliance, the issue could have been solved peacefully, with no need for a formal challenge to a fight. For them, it was better that everyone prioritized settling their differences and living harmoniously. But it wasn't their place, and besides, Zen had already returned. Perhaps he was the key to resolving this conflict once and for all. Once he entered the portal of the Oracle City, Zen swiftly flew through the channel headed towards Cloudy City. With his fast skilled bodily movement, it only took him a very short time to reach the other end of the channel. Swish! There was a flash of white light as Zen's figure emerged from the transmission array and into Cloudy City. Several guards were stationed around the transmission array of the Cloudy City. The heavenly evil sect might have been wiped out, but all major cities remained on high alert and all main cities were heavily guarded. Anyone who came in or out must have a token or, in the case of merchants, special documents issued by the World Commercial Alliance. Zen's sudden arrival alerted the several illuminating Soul Realm guards, who immediately set out to identify him and his cultivation level. To their amazement, however, they found that they couldn't see through his cultivation level at all. They still had a job to do though, even if they knew Zen wasn't someone they should provoke. One of the guards braced himself and set out to fulfill his duty. Excuse me, you are... Of course, Zen was already too anxious with the imminent fight between Margaret and Letitia to bother with these guards and their insignificant questions. He ignored them and immediately flew towards his destination. The guards, on the other hand, were left in a daze, since all it took was a brief flash for Zen to vanish from their sight. The dutiful guard immediately set out to sound an alarm, but his colleague stopped him. There's no need. Why, we can't just let a stranger break into Cloudy City, the dutiful guard asked with a puzzled expression. However, his colleague shook his head. That's no stranger. That's Zen from Cloud Hall. The dutiful guard's eyes widened in shock. That's Zen. He then looked up to the sky where Zen had vanished, but there was no trace of him. Above Cloudy City were several virtual Tribulation Realm warriors, along with a few Life and Death Realm masters like Letitia and Xander. These people could be considered as the top warriors within the central region, who were now head-to-head all because of one man. This was probably the first time this had happened in the history of the entire central region. Letitia's strength had greatly increased when she entered the Life and Death Realm. Even if she was only at the first level of the Life and Death Realm, she was strong enough to take on a second or even a third level Life and Death Realm warrior. Margaret was only at the Internal Elixir Realm. Internal Elixir Realm warriors were common to be seen in the many sects of the central region, but her purple power body was exceptionally strong. Her abilities not only included getting help in the form of huge swords from the purple power world. She also had a terrifying ability to summon the true spirit that could lay waste to both heaven and earth. If this battle reached a point of life and death, it could spell disaster for everyone. Letitia herself had witnessed how Margaret summoned countless giant swords that chopped hundreds of thousands of heavenly evil sects independent warriors into mincemeat. Many of the casualties had been virtual Tribulation Realm warriors. She knew better than to take this battle lightly. Truth be told, Letitia never expected to find herself in a battle just for a man. But this was Zen. Just thinking of his kiss made her feel warm inside. How could she share him with others? Swish! The two of them faced against each other as a gentle wind swept over the battle arena. The Ice Phoenix's feathers fell behind Letitia, whose eyes flashed with a fierce icy light. A large, mysterious ice halberd appeared in her hands. Margaret, on the other hand, stood not too far away. A stubborn aura exuded from the young girl, indicating her persistence and determination to win this fight. Letitia knew she had no choice but to be merciless for Margaret to know her position. Margaret was only an Internal Elixir Realm warrior, facing against a life and death realm master, yet she remained calm in the face of adversity. Her determination to stay with Zen gave her the strength and courage to face Letitia, and she would do whatever it took to achieve her goal. Margaret truly did not expect anything when it came to Zen's love, unlike Letitia. She knew he would never love her back wholeheartedly, and she had no qualms sharing him with other women. All she really wanted was to stay by his side. With Letitia arming herself with her mysterious ice halberd, Margaret extended her hand and countless ripples suddenly began to appear in the sky. True to her signature, huge swords from the purple power world had pierced through the clouds in her aid. Whoosh! Just as the battle was set to formally begin, a figure suddenly shot forward with incredible speed and stood between the two ladies. Zen's gaze was calm and there was a gentle smile on his face. He looked at Margaret and then at Letitia. "What are you ladies doing?" he asked, pretending as if he didn't know anything. Zen. The sight of the young man filled Margaret's heart with relief. She really didn't want to fight with Letitia to begin with, and the huge swords from the sky immediately vanished as she ran towards Zen. Meanwhile, Letitia was still on guard, her mysterious ice halberd pointed at Margaret as she stared at Zen. She would never do something so brazen like throwing herself into a man's arms, just as Margaret did just now, but there was an evident trace of sadness in her eyes as she looked at the scene. Huge smiles broke out from both Xander and Brent when they saw Zen. They both greeted Zen with smiles. Brent, the ethereal spirit sect's top talent, had always wanted to challenge Zen but never really got the chance. Still, he called him brother-in-law. Imogen's face quickly twisted in anger when she heard it, letting out a cold, obvious snort to indicate her displeasure. Zen quickly turned his attention to her and cupped his hands. "Master Imogen, I heard that you've recently returned from overseas. Congratulations. I'm very happy to see you." Imogen tutted, "Are you really happy? I think you must have wished I died when I was away overseas." Imogen had always thought highly of Zen, but his relationship with Margaret made her furious at the young man. Zen, however, retained the smile on his face, knowing that resolving the conflict between the two ladies was the most important thing on the agenda. Since Imogen was clearly on Letitia's side, of course she would be hostile to him. As for Letitia, she remained as still as an exquisite ice statue, but the moment she looked at Margaret's face, a cold chill surfaced on her face. Chapter 934. Margaret's EQ. Margaret contentedly leaned into Zen's embrace in joyful bliss. Right now, all that mattered was him and his comforting presence. Their surroundings in the current context of the situation did not matter so long as he was here. The young woman's obvious smile was like a thorn that pierced through Letitia's heart. Clang! The loud, clanging sound reverberated in her ears as the ice halberd fell from her grasp and shattered into 1,000 crystal pieces of life vitality that dissipated and returned to the spiritual energy of heaven and earth. "Master, I want to go back," Letitia murmured, turning away from the offending scene in front of her. Her back was straight and her gait was elegant, like an ice phoenix that flew back towards the cloud hall, heartbroken but dignified. Zen, however, could tell that she was hurt. "Tia, Tia," both Zen and Imogen shouted at the same time. The elder cast a burning glare at Zen before quickly following behind a sulking Letitia. A few elders remained despite Letitia's and Imogen's departure. One of them was Saint Morphins, who smiled bitterly at Zen. The young man had risen in leaps and bounds when it came to cultivation, and his extraordinary luck helped him survive multiple near-death experiences, but the same could not be said for his love life. It was normal for warriors to have multiple women. War kings and war emperors from the Divine Kingdom continent even had thousands. An ordinary illuminating soul realm warrior in the central region would normally have a group of women that he would regularly indulge in sexual relationships with. However, Letitia was different. Saint Morphins feared that she was someone who would never concede to such an arrangement. Moreover, Imogen was fiercely protective of Letitia and would not just stand by while Zen had another woman with him. Saint Morphins could only hope that Zen would be able to solve this matter on his own. Zen wanted to follow Letitia, but Margaret was already curled up in his arms like a sheep. She was obviously very emotionally overwhelmed, and he had no idea how to deal with it. This wasn't his line of expertise. He was a hardened warrior who only knew the ways of battle and the path of cultivation. He had no experiences whatsoever when it came to love and emotions. Meanwhile, Letitia was already inside her ice palace where icy mist had already filled the place. A lifelike ice phoenix flew slowly around her. Although this ice phoenix was a creature produced by visualization, it had gained some semblance of intelligence for having existed by Letitia's side for so long. It could feel Letitia's sadness, which also made it sad in return. The ice phoenix let out a soft, melancholic cry as it nipped Letitia's hair softly. Letitia couldn't help but smile when she realized how the ice phoenix was trying to comfort her. She reached out and gently stroked its head, but the loneliness remained in her heart. There was also that frustration present, that lingering feeling of stubbornness she couldn't erase. She didn't know why or where it came from. Was it maybe because she instinctively hated Margaret? Or was it because she hated Zen? Knock, knock, knock. The icy mist parted and revealed Imogen smiling gently at Letitia. Master, Letitia called out, forcing a smile on her face at the presence of her master. Imogen sighed. Don't force yourself to smile when you're sad, she told her. I'm not sad, Letitia said, shaking her head in denial. Silly girl, how can I not understand your thoughts? Letitia was by no means inferior to Imogen in terms of cultivation attainments. Even her talent was an outstanding existence compared to the divine-level talents in the 4 divine kingdoms. However, she was also still young and she could never compare to the amount of worldly wisdom Imogen held for having lived so many years. Letitia couldn't help but pout with how easily Imogen saw through her. Sighing, her master sat down next to her. No matter how you look at it, Zen is the perfect husband. Warriors' lifespan is so long that it's normal for them to have several women. Imogen had previously stood so fiercely on Letitia's side, but here she was, trying to convince her otherwise. Letitia reached out her finger and formed a 6-sided snowflake in the midst of the mist. If he is the perfect husband, won't that mean that all women in the world would want to marry him? She complained. A snowflake was normally only the size of a needlepoint, and it required a great deal of vision to distinguish its shape. But the one on Letitia's hand continued to extend and expand until it reached the size of her palm. All women in the world want to marry him, Imogen repeated with a smile. That brat might not be able to take it, but you're half right. No matter what, you are truly being too stubborn. In my opinion, Margaret is much smarter than you. Letitia pursed her lips at her master's words. She's smarter than me. Bah, she wasn't very sure if she was more talented than the warriors from the 4 divine kingdoms, but she was pretty sure she was the best among all Central Region warriors in terms of talent. She was quite conceited in that regard. The fact was that Letitia's talent would place her as an outstanding warrior in the entire great world. If all female warriors of the 3 continents were gathered and ranked together, she would be on par with Fiona of the Wind Divine Kingdom and possibly just a slight bit inferior to Amber of the Demon Knight. It was only because she had yet to enter the Tower of Crystal to determine the stage her talent belonged to that she couldn't be too sure. Imogen quickly corrected herself saying, I meant in terms of EQ, you're still a child in this aspect. And Zen is too. Of course, Imogen could see what Saint Morphans could see. It was just that she didn't want to lose face and her prestige in front of Xander earlier. The only reason why there was a dispute was that Imogen was fiercely determined to protect Letitia, but she clearly understood what these youngsters were thinking. If Zen also had a higher EQ, this issue would have been quickly solved by him. He only had 2 women, yet he wasn't able to deal with them. People with a higher EQ had multiple women who all got along well with each other. Zen had just turned 20 while Letitia was only a few years older. They were both still too young and had hundreds, even thousands of years left to live. They were still naive children who still had no idea how love and relationships worked. Margaret, on the other hand, had displayed an extremely higher EQ. She was incredibly stupid in the beginning, but was able to quickly restrain all her pettiness and turned into an extremely obedient wife in front of Zen. She treated him as the absolute center of her world and would rather die than not stay by his side. Men absolutely adored this kind of woman. Letitia thought about this for a while. Silence and the mysterious mist surrounded both master and pupil before Letitia's eyes finally brightened in realization. I can't do it now, she said. Imogen, however, heaved a sigh of relief. Being unable to do it now did not mean that she would not be able to do it in the future. It seemed her pupil had thought things through. Meanwhile, in a quiet place in Cloudy City, both Xander and Zen found a chance to catch up and talk. Xander immediately expressed his gratitude towards Zen in helping rebuild the ethereal spirit sect. If it weren't for him, the heavenly evil sect would have still used their base as headquarters and they would have been completely erased from history. As Zen talked with Xander, his mind couldn't help but wander towards Letitia. Although she betrayed no expression on her fair face earlier, her figure that slowly floated away made his heart ache. Xander was a clever man. The reason he stood up for Margaret before was because she had no one else to rely on. But with Zen here, it would now be improper for him to get involved. Besides, Margaret had the upper hand in this. Zen also carried a lot of responsibility when it came to this issue. After their chat, Xander got up and left with Brent. Before leaving, Brent's face was full of smiles and he kept asking Zen when he'd marry his sister. Once the people from the ethereal spirit sect left, Margaret's smile disappeared and a serious expression fell on her face. I think you should go to the Cloud Hall, she suggested. Why should I? I'm not going, Zen said. A smile appeared on her face. Are you really not going? Chapter 935, Pestering. Although Margaret seemed rather stupid while dealing with most things, she was very clear on matters regarding affection. She was keenly aware that she could not monopolize Zen. She did not want other women to get close to him, but she also knew that Zen was promising and would become someone remarkable in the future. He had already become the strongest person in the central region at such a young age. Certainly, he would not be limited to the small central region in the time ahead. Margaret would be deeply satisfied if she were to marry such a famous talent. But how could she possibly attempt to control him? Letitia had gone off in a huff, but Margaret just ignored her. Margaret was not someone to be trifled with. She could not sympathize with Letitia, but she understood that Letitia was important to Zen. She had said the words because she did not want to see Zen upset. Why, what should I do if I go there? Zen asked, forcing a smile. Margaret returned a smile, whispering into Zen's ear, don't all women want to be coaxed? She is the hall leader, but she is still childish when it comes to affection. She will be happier if you coax her with a few nice words. Margaret's voice sounded soft and pleasant as she talked to Zen. Zen smiled and kissed her lightly on the forehead. You sound like you're very experienced. Margaret's face turned red, her eyes rolling as she shot Zen a coquettish glance. Well, I'm not that experienced. I'm just giving you some advice. However, Margaret's words calmed Zen down a little. Although he felt that it was not easy to deal with this matter, he still knew that there were some things that he had to face on his own. After arranging a place for Margaret to stay, he was prepared to enter the Cloud Hall. However, suddenly, the ancestral dragon in the spirit beast bag on Zen's back stuck out its small head and let out a quack toward Margaret. The dragon's face revealed a friendly expression. This little dragon, Zen began, shaking his head. When he had been in the Heavenly Feather Sacred Place, the Demon Knight members had gifted him a small spirit beast bag. Normally, a Sumeru space could not keep living creatures. However, the space of the spirit beast bag had been specifically designed and arranged for them. Although there wasn't much of it, it was enough for the young ancestral dragon to live inside. Perhaps the little dragon wanted to come out and get some fresh air after being stuffed up in the spirit beast bag for so long. This time, when it saw Margaret, it cried out to her and left the spirit beast bag to pounce at her. Besides considering Zen as its family, the ancestral dragon seemed to like Margaret very much. Zen was puzzled. Could it be because Margaret had the purple power body? Or was it something else he did not know of? Zen could not afford to ponder on this at the moment. He decided to temporarily leave the ancestral dragon in Margaret's care. Transforming into a beam of light, he then flew toward the Cloud Hall. Although the Cloud Hall's sect protecting array was still open, Zen chose to bypass a shortcut and straightaway went through the main entrance. Several guards were keeping watch at the main entrance of the Cloud Hall. When they saw Zen, they respectfully released a part of the enchanted barrier to let him in. After the battle between the Oracle City and the Heavenly Evil Sect, Zen returned to Cloud Hall after an entire year. However, he was still very familiar with its surroundings. As he went through the main hall, he swiftly made his way toward the Ice Palace. Just as he arrived at the entrance of the Ice Palace, Zen felt waves of cold air seep out from the inside. Observing the milky white breath for a while, he walked deep into the cold air. However, just as Zen entered the palace, a few loud sounds broke through the air. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. 3 dark blue ice spikes suddenly shot toward him. Zen smiled as he watched the ice spikes rapidly come at him. His body flashed as he dodged them easily. However, just as he did so, another 3 ice spikes zoomed over. This time, Zen did not dodge the attack. Instead, he caught the ice spikes in his hand and threw them to the ground, resulting in a cracking sound. Ice spikes continued to shoot out from the white mist as Zen advanced, still getting attacked. As he continued to move toward the Ice Palace, he caught more than 100 ice spikes along the way. They were getting faster and faster, their attacks getting stronger. Zen's face betrayed a wry smile. It seemed that Letitia was very annoyed with him this time. She seemed to have lost her temper. An ordinary life and death realm warrior would not be able to withstand such sharp ice spikes. To Zen, however, these attacks were nothing special. In this great world, only the Soul Sea Realm Masters could threaten him by making use of the domain. Life and Death Realm Masters would not be able to kill him no matter how powerful they were, unless they destroyed the entire Great World. Whoosh! Zen quickened his pace and rushed into the depths of the Ice Palace. Letitia sat on the ground, her feet bare. Thousands of ice spikes floated in the air around her. When she saw Zen appear, she grew even more furious, a trace of grievance and disappointment on her face. She waved a hand callously and all the ice spikes shot toward Zen. Seeing this, Zen simply stood there without moving, his eyes closed. However, when she noticed that Zen stood still, not dodging them, Letitia was astonished and frightened. The ice spikes that she had just released were powerful enough to kill ordinary life and death realm masters. Letitia knew that Zen's physical body was strong and different from those of ordinary warriors, but no matter how strong and sturdy he was, he would not be able to withstand such an attack. She had initially thought that Zen could dodge easily, but she did not expect him to suddenly stand still. The ice spikes she had shot out were not far away from him now. She immediately screamed at him, "Dodge! You can't withstand them!" Clang, clang, clang. Thousands of ice spikes rushed to Zen at the same time and crashed into his body, turning into blue ice crystals and releasing sharp sounds. In no time, the shattered pieces of ice had buried Zen. Letitia was scared witless. Although she hated Zen right now, she still cared for him. Running barefoot toward the pile of ice dregs in panic, she forgot that she could remove them easily. After all, the ice spikes had been transformed from her life vitality. With just a thought, she would be able to turn them into her life vitality once again. She used her bare hands to quickly dig into the pile of ice dregs as she kept shouting his name, Zen. Zen. Panic was written all over her face. However, just as Letitia was digging with all her might, a hand suddenly stretched out from the pile of ice dregs and grabbed her waist, pulling her up to the dregs. Zen slowly climbed out. Seeing that Zen was safe and sound, Letitia was both surprised and happy. However, anger and grievance replaced the emotions again. She had indeed been very worried just now. After all, her strength had increased manifold after she reached the life and death realm. Her attack had been intense, but she did not expect Zen to emerge completely unharmed. Letitia was aware that since Zen had become a life and death realm warrior, his strength had increased by a lot. She did not think that it would grow to this extent. "You, get your hands off me." Letitia was shy and furious at the same time. Her small and soft body struggled in Zen's embrace. But Zen wasn't willing to let go of her. He wrapped his arms around Letitia's waist even more tightly, holding her by his side. With Zen's current strength, how could Letitia break free? After struggling for a while, Letitia was exhausted. Her stiff body relaxed, but she still had on a long face as she stared at Zen with hatred. An idea suddenly struck her. Streams of life vitality burst out from her body, condensing into a large number of ice crystals that wrapped around Zen and transformed into a huge ice coffin. As the ice crystals accumulated one layer at a time, the coffin got larger and larger, tightly freezing the two of them inside. The cold was indeed piercing, but Letitia's ferocious face only escalated Zen's desire for her. It could be that Zen was unable to coax Letitia with some nice words, but he could use his actions to prove his affection for her. Chapter 936, Wedding. The ice that Letitia had condensed was as hard as iron, but still Zen's power erupted, the muscles in his body trembling. Countless cracks appeared on the surface of the ice coffin. From the outside, the originally transparent and flawless ice coffin donned a milky white color due to the cracks. This was followed by a sharp sound when the ice coffin suddenly shattered. Letitia was still peeved. When the ice coffin collapsed, she once again released her strong life vitality and another ice coffin replaced it. However, soon after, Zen used his strength again and the new ice coffin broke down. As the ice shards continued to condense and collapse underneath the pair of them, their number kept increasing. The ice shards gathered together to form a small ice mountain, causing the two to ascend higher and higher. When Letitia went through her tribulation last time, the dome of the ice palace had almost been ruined by her. Afterward, it was reconstructed, leaving an opening in the dome. One could see the sky through it in the middle of the palace. As the ice mountain continued to rise, it pushed the two of them through the opening in the roof. Letitia's ice palace was not only built in the deepest part of the Cloud Hall, it was also the highest point. Guards patrolled the Cloud Hall. Their eyesights and vision were strong. If the warriors below looked up, they would witness the scene at the top of the ice palace. Zen still held Letitia tightly in his arms when the ice mountain lifted them out of the roof. Why is there an ice mountain growing out of the ice palace? Could it be that the leader is in the process of cultivating a new method? Is there a new breakthrough? Idiot, can't you see that there are two people on top of the ice mountain? Although the discussions were taking place quite far away, as a life and death realm warrior, Letitia had a keen sense of hearing. Even though their voices were hushed, she could hear them clearly. She felt embarrassed and ashamed. Lowering her voice, she said to Zen angrily, "Let go of me." "I'm not letting you go," Zen said to Letitia with resolution. "Please." Letitia had never begged in her life, but she felt she had no other choice. "It's useless even if you beg me." A trace of a smile surfaced on Zen's face. The various elders, stewards, and disciples of Cloud Hall realized that they must stay away and give Letitia and Zen some private moments, but they could not contain their curiosity. More and more people looked up at the couple from windows and corners. Letitia's face turned red from pale. The blush spread across her neck. Even though she was lying on the ice-cool mountain, it didn't do anything to help the temperature. She suddenly felt warm all over. She was furious and mortified. After repeatedly begging Zen to no avail, Letitia, who was always as tough as a man, could not hold it in any longer and burst into tears. "You jerk. You're bullying me," she sobbed. "I like bullying you," Zen said playfully, grinning and staring fixedly at her pretty face. Tears welled up in Letitia's eyes as she bit Zen's shoulder heavily. However, his body was strong like a sacred weapon. Her teeth almost broke due to the bite. She couldn't beat him, nor could she scold him. Now, she couldn't even bite him. She was like a helpless little girl, burying her head in his shoulder and crying. Zen ran his fingers through Letitia's hair, lifted her head and pulled her face close to his. He looked at her tear-stained face, lowered his head and gently kissed her lips. Letitia whined unwillingly, but not long after, she gave up resisting and closed her eyes, giving in to the kiss. She kissed him back passionately. As the leader of Cloud Hall, she could not believe herself. She was kissing a man on the top of the ice palace under the watchful eyes of so many warriors. However, she stopped giving it any thought. She was so absorbed in the kiss that she forgot about the people witnessing the scene. At the entrance of a small thatched cottage on the side of Cloud Hall, Imogen gazed at the pair with a satisfied smile on her face. After a long while, she turned around and entered her cottage, muttering, "It is perfectly normal for young people to kiss each other." When Letitia's frenzied mind calmed down, she reached out behind Zen's back and gently pressed a hand to the ice mountain. The ice disappeared in an instant, turning into life vitality and dissipating in the air. Losing support of the small ice mountain, Zen and Letitia plummeted downward. Thud, Zen fell to the ground with a heavy sound while Letitia used him as a cushion. Her petite body bounced from his body, her hands adjusting her messy long hair as she stared at Zen with a shy smile. Their passionate kiss had aroused him. Many warriors had experienced the beauty of sex at the virtual tribulation realm. However, Zen had only slept with one woman before, and that was Margaret. He was unable to contain his desire for long. With a flash, he pulled Letitia close again. This time, Letitia showed signs of panic. She covered her chest with her hands and frowned. "No." "Why?" Zen pouted. He wouldn't force Letitia. "You promised me before. We can only do that after our wedding." Letitia was a strong warrior, but deep in her heart, she was a very traditional woman. Many warriors did not value marriage, but she was an exception. She did not want this so soon, so Zen didn't force her. "Then tomorrow we'll start preparing for our wedding ceremony," he whispered softly in her ear. Letitia pursed her lips but didn't say anything else, meaning that she agreed with him. The news of their wedding ceremony soon spread like wildfire across the central region through the World Commercial Alliance's channels within a matter of 3 days. Currently, the World Commercial Alliance was the largest force in the central region. However, the Cloud Hall, which Zen belonged to, was the largest sect. They had sent out countless invitations to the third-grade forces and above in the central region. The fight between Letitia and Margaret seemed to have come to an end. In the past, Letitia could not have imagined sharing her husband with another woman. But now, even though she had strong jealousy in her heart, she had to let go of it because of Zen. In the future, she and Margaret might quarrel a lot, but at present, she did not care for it. Preparations for the wedding ceremony continued for more than a month. After an auspicious day was selected, the transmission array in the cloudy city flashed continuously, and the reputable warriors came to congratulate the couple. The various rare gifts alone were the size of a small hill about 20 to 30 feet high. The Cloud Hall had been whitewashed and had a bright, new look. The 3 divine textures created by Zen had made the Cloud Hall's runic expert, Felix, feel inferior to him. Even if he expended all his energy, he still wouldn't be able to set up a sect-protecting array as strong as Zen's. However, Felix's talent in runes was nothing to be ashamed of. By studying Zen's divine textures, his knowledge of runes had increased manifold. Other than Zen, no one else in the central region was stronger than him. This time, Felix did help Zen. He created several runes to decorate the Cloud Hall. Their power was not exceptional, but as long as one replenished life vitality crystals to activate the runes, they effused different colors. Some rays projected onto the enchanted barrier named the Light of Water and morphed into flying dragons and phoenixes, dancing on top of it with exuberance. In the Cloud Hall's martial arts hall, a dense pack of warriors had gathered from all over Central Region. These big names were all leaders of various top clans and sects. Of course, the sect leaders of the 4th grade sects, including the mysterious Luna Hall, Bloodwood Cliff and Black Mountain sect, were all present. When they had first met Zen, he had merely been a junior at the Illuminating Soul Realm. However, right before their eyes, Zen's cultivation level soared without limits, and soon no one in the Central Region could contend with him. As they came up to congratulate him, they sighed in their hearts. They used to look down on him, but now all they could do was worship him. Chapter 937, The Wedding Gift. Margaret busied herself in the kitchen in the Cloud Hall. The way she held the kitchen knife was kind of stiff, but her swift motions of chopping made the knife glow with the sharpness of cold silver light. Today was Letitia and Zen's wedding day, and it seemed like she was absent-minded while doing the chore. The knife she was using was made out of heptal gold and was extremely sharp. Since Margaret was spacing out, she failed to notice the deep cutting marks she created against the ironwood chopping board. The clamor of voices outside kept ringing in her ears and made her distracted. Margaret helplessly pursed her lips as she continued chopping swiftly, turning the vegetables on the chopping board into tiny pieces. Caw, caw, the ancestral dragon let out a moan. Its tiny body curled up. Ever since the ancestral dragon had secretly eaten the dishes cooked by Margaret some time ago, it had almost forgotten about Zen. This glutton had been staying with Margaret almost every day. Margaret was in a trance. Perhaps, she unknowingly focused her attention on the commotion outside, so she slowed down in her work. The ancestral dragon made the noise to remind her to hurry up. Be patient, wait for a while, and your meal will be ready, Margaret said with a smile. She was completely oblivious that she had already shredded the vegetables into a puree. Boom, boom, boom. Above the Cloud Hall, a speck of sparkling and translucent radiance rose into the air, turning into multicolored clouds that spread beautifully across the sky. Margaret could see the scene clearly. But she didn't stop what she was doing. The ironwood chopping board had already been broken into several parts by her. Caw, caw, the ancestral dragon whimpered again. Wait for a minute. There was still a faint smile on Margaret's face as she appeased the ancestral dragon. But that smile never changed. It was like a mask, looking extremely stiff. Caw, caw, bang, the kitchen knife in Margaret's hand was shoved firmly on the stove. Her soft body slightly trembled, and a powerful aura burst forth from her body. Didn't I tell you to wait? Caw, seeing that Margaret was about to go berserk, the ancestral dragon felt chills through its veins. It coiled up its small body immediately and buried its head in it. In the martial arts hall, the grand wedding ceremony was carried out in an orderly manner. And as expected of martial artists' wedding ceremony, it was usually very solemn. The cost of money for any part of this rite would entail a considerable amount that would be more than enough for an ordinary family to live for several hundred years. However, there was not so much red tape involved in Letitia and Zen's wedding ceremony. Amidst the blessings and congratulations, Zen stood in the middle of the martial arts hall, waiting for the arrival of the bride. Soon, his bride's whole entourage slowly approached him on a cloud. Everyone's gaze focused on Letitia, who was wearing a red robe. She was surrounded by many servants who were dressed beautifully for such an occasion. Even if Letitia hadn't worn any makeup at all, she would still be incomparably elegant and beautiful. She was breathtakingly dolled up for her grand wedding. Every detail of her looks exuded perfectness. Even a single glance of her would make one's heart beat wildly. When Letitia descended from the cloud, the sound of gongs and drums reverberated through the hall. At this moment, everyone could watch the 9-colored auspicious clouds begin to dance in the air, together with a dragon and a phoenix projected on the enchanted barrier of light of water. In Cloudy City, many ordinary citizens looked up at the colorful cloud hall in the sky. Their faces filled with envy. I heard that it's a grand wedding ceremony held by the Immortals. What a grand scene. Humph, Immortals. They are only a group of extremely powerful warriors with high-level cultivation. Aren't you a warrior too? When can you hold a grand wedding ceremony like that? The news about the grand wedding ceremony quickly spread among the ordinary citizens, creating numerous rumors about it. The stories such as there were some peaches of immortality that had grown over 10,000 years, and nectar which could keep people from all diseases, and other sorts of strange legends went wild among the crowd of ordinary beings. Just as Zen was making his way towards Letitia, people in the central region heard a laugh. The laughter seemed to come from the sky, but it suddenly spread out to the whole place, making everyone feel taken aback. Zen frowned. He was clueless who had come. But today was his wedding day. If anything unpleasant happened, that would spoil his big day. Whoosh! A figure shot down from the sky. It was an old man dressed in white clothes. Unexpectedly, the old man directly went through the light of water. The extremely tough enchanted barrier did not cause any problem to him. If it was Zen who tried to walk through the light of water, he would need to enter through the weak area at the bottom to pass through with no difficulty. However, this old man was able to penetrate the light of water with ease. Such theurgy he possessed amazed Zen. Everyone raised their heads and looked over. Their eyes revealed shocked expressions as they carefully examined this old man. There was no way that they could tell the old man's strength. Most of the warriors present were at the virtual tribulation realm, and a few independent warriors were at the life and death realm. However, even the most powerful of them couldn't see through this old man's strength. So they assumed that his strength was beyond the soul sea realm. However, Zen was clear that this person's strength was way beyond the spirit supreme realm. Previously, when Zen was with the 7 masters of the celestial position, he had gotten acquainted of what spirit supreme realm masters were like from the aura around them. If someone's cultivation was a level higher than the spirit supreme realm, he might be able to distinguish it. And it would be hard for him to estimate the person's strength if it was 2 levels above it. Nonetheless, his knowledge about the strength of warriors that are above the spirit supreme realm was still in a gray area. Judging from his intuition, Zen believed that this old man was indeed a warrior whose strength was beyond the spirit supreme realm. Most people in the crowd were nervous, especially the people from the World Commercial Alliance and the Ethereal Spirit Sect, fearing that some bad thing might happen. Although the bride of this grand wedding ceremony wasn't Margaret, in the end, Zen was the man that she had to rely on for the rest of her life. Brent didn't look good at this time. He pursed his lips and seemed to be gloomy. He fully knew that his sister was not happy right now. So he selfishly hoped that this old man, who appeared out of nowhere, would disrupt the wedding ceremony so that Letitia would be upset. As for some others, such as those from Black Mountain Sect and the like who had once clashed with Zen, they had no choice but to submit to the Cloud Hall. With the unknown tension in the air, they were eager to watch a good show. On the surface, they looked like they were paying tribute to Zen, but deep inside, they all hoped that he would have some trouble. Seeing Zen look uneasy, the old man roared into laughter. "Don't be nervous. Today is your wedding day. I come to attend your wedding ceremony. What, am I not welcome?" Hearing this, Zen heaved a sigh of relief. The old man didn't seem to have borne an ill intention. No matter who he was, Zen could only greet him with a smile. He said in a clear voice, "Anyone who comes would be our guest. Since you are here to attend my wedding ceremony, I'm more than pleased to extend my warm welcome." "Ha ha, kid, you are a nice man. I like your straightforward manner," the old man said and laughed. "However, I have come here in a hurry and haven't brought any gift." "That's not good," the old man added with a frown. Zen smiled faintly. "Don't be bothered about the gift. It's only a way to express your blessings for us. We warriors don't care about those unimportant things. As long as all of you come here to celebrate our wedding day, I'm already very contented. Please be seated here and have fun." The other guests also nodded their heads. The 2 maids beside them added a table to make him sit above the salt. Although these maids did not know how strong this old man was, from the reactions of the top masters in the central region, they knew the old man was not someone to be trifled with. Even though this old man looked quite messy, they all knew that he was akin to a powerful being, who was far beyond their wildest imagination. So he must have the seat of an honored guest. To their surprise, the old man suddenly shook his head and said, "No." Zen's eyes flashed, confused. "Excuse me, a wedding ceremony is a great event in one's life. How can I not prepare a wedding gift?" The old man then shook his head fervently. A look of helplessness appeared on Zen's face. He wanted to roll his eyes in his heart, but he still managed to look nice. Why did some old men become so difficult to deal with as they were getting on in years? Perhaps in the future, when he grew old, he would also behave like this, he wondered. However, before Zen could say anything, a few of the more brave guests started to clamor. "Since you want to give them a wedding gift, then show it to us. You intentionally said so to keep all of us in suspense. You've already prepared the wedding gift, right? Then let everyone see what it is." These guests who were speaking did not have a high level of cultivation and were only at the primary stage of virtual tribulation realm. However, it was Zen's wedding day, so they assumed that no matter how strong this old man was, he wouldn't make things look ugly in such an occasion. The old man chuckled and nodded. Ha ha, how do you know that I've already had a gift for them? With that, the old man's body instantly flashed, and he appeared right in front of Zen, who didn't even have time to react. After that, he faced Zen with his eyes wide open. Then everyone saw Zen close his eyes and quickly fall to the ground. Chapter 938, A Divine Weapon. The old man's actions were sudden, and everyone's faces changed drastically. However, there was also a small group of warriors who had a smirk on their faces. Like a comet, Zen had risen quickly to prominence and had been in the limelight for a long time. But in the end, even he was defeated by someone. Letitia's expressions turned stern and her face became red with fury. She stomped her feet, and the pearl crown on her head swayed as she began to rush towards Zen. Imogen, Xander and the three Fat Alliance heads all had nervous expressions on their faces. They didn't know what was going to happen next. However, before anyone could react, time suddenly stopped. In the heavenly stellar sacred place, when they had hatched the ancestral dragon egg, the celestial position warriors had increased the time flow rate. This meant that every day inside the hatchery was just a few seconds. Time passed as quickly as sand running through one's fingers in there. 1 year had passed in the outside world, while inside that barrier, 1,000 years passed. And now, in the cloud hall, time had become 1,000 times slower. Everything was happening at a speed that was 1,000th of the outside world. People moved slower than a snail. In fact, it was safe to say they weren't moving at all. It was difficult for the naked eye to notice their movement. What was even more terrifying was the area that was affected. Time had almost come to a halt within a 1,000-mile radius of the cloud hall. This was in stark contrast to the enchanted barrier, both in terms of direction and area. The birds in the sky stopped in midair, and the smoke leaving the chimneys solidified into a column that did not get dispersed. The ripples on the surface of the lake also remained the same. Of course, this was only for the outside world. However, somehow, the ancestral dragon was unaffected by this change. Gagum, the ancestral dragon cried. At its current age, its intelligence was the same as a human toddler's. Although it was not affected by the change in the time flow rate, it was curious about why Margaret had stopped moving. Suddenly, as if by instinct, it seemed to sense something and flew out of the window, heading straight towards the martial arts hall. The old man smiled and looked up at the sky before he let out a sigh. Time waits for no one. Although your cultivation has advanced tremendously, resources in the lower world are scarce. You're still too slow. Let me lend a helping hand. Just as he finished speaking, the ancestral dragon flew in. Gagum, Gagum, the beast called out anxiously when it saw Zen lying on the ground with his eyes closed. Its hostility towards this old man was intense. Like any baby to its mother, it wanted revenge. The old man chuckled and told the ancestral dragon, "You puny thing." Instead of finishing his sentence, he ignored the ancestral dragon and walked towards Zen. Extending his withered hand, he brought out a dark green medicinal pill. As soon as the pill was taken out, it flew toward the sky. Only enlightened a little and you want to escape? I don't think so. No, in your dreams. The old man's hand gently twirled and an invisible force somehow dragged the medicinal pill down. The weird thing was that the pill did not only seem to be conscious but also sentient. It looked capable of fighting since green halos suddenly appeared from within the pill. Those halos instantly condensed into a green bolt of lightning and tried to counterattack the old man. This old man seemed genuinely unhappy with this display. With a cold snort, he pointed his finger and the round pill broke into several tiny pieces which then turned into a green cloud and spread out. Following this, the green-colored cloud began to float motionlessly in the air above the cloud hall. Down, the old man let out a soft whisper. As if commanded by a master, the huge green cloud started to slowly swirl and then finally morphed into a small stream that began to flow into Zen's mouth. Very soon, Zen had completely absorbed the green cloud. The old man then walked gracefully towards his seat and poured out a glass of fine wine for himself. Next, he blinked his eyes and time was restored to normal within an instant. Letitia, who was midway in taking a step forward, immediately stabilized herself, but she still looked flustered. Although this old man had just slowed down time, it hadn't absolutely stopped. In fact, even if he wanted to completely stop time, he couldn't have done that no matter how hard he tried. There was a theory about the time law which postulated that any creature who cultivated the time law could only slow down or increase the time flow rate, they couldn't stop it. Thus, everyone was still able to see what was going on in front of them. Their minds could still think and their senses were still intact. By now they understood that this old man truly did not bear any enmity towards them. However, his practice and command of the time law had left everyone stunned. In the central region, very few martial artists were proficient in space law, and cultivating the time law was far more difficult than cultivating the space law. As a result, until now, there hadn't been a single martial artist who was proficient in time law. Zen was an exception, although he had never demonstrated his theurgy in time law. However, this old man had changed the Cloud Hall's time flow rate with a few simple flicks of his eyelids. During that period, everyone and everything had almost come to a halt. This was a mysterious and powerful method at play. Everyone could sense that this old man was incredibly strong. In fact, the word, strong, was a bit of an understatement. His power was simply terrifying. The pill the old man had taken out was even harder to fathom. It had the consciousness to run away and was even able to attack the old man when forced to. At the same time, the old man had been completely unharmed by the display of thunder that had ensued. The green bolt of lightning from the pill was powerful enough to kill any mortal man. But the old man had been completely unaffected. So, undoubtedly, the pill was potent. Forgetting about all that, everyone was quite envious right now. Not of the old man, but of Zen. He didn't seem to know this guy, but the old man had still come all the way over here to give him a wedding gift. The warriors who had gloated at Zen's misfortune, and everyone else too, were now green with envy. "Sir, what did you do to Zen?" Letitia couldn't help but step forward and ask the old man. The old man lightly shook his head and casually replied, "I gave him a wedding gift, of course." When he finished speaking, he rolled his eyes and slapped his head. "Oh right, how silly of me. The groom got a wedding present, so the bride should have one too. But this wedding gift is a bit simple. I hope you won't mind." The old man patted his belly. But nothing happened. Then he muttered to himself, or rather to his own belly, Now. Don't be greedy. I didn't put these divine weapons in there for you to use them. Even when you did use them, I never said anything about it, but do you really think they are yours to keep?" Everyone was looking at each other in astonishment. Was this guy crazy? Why is this old man talking to his stomach? Is he a madman? At that moment, Zen stood up and asked with a smile on his face, "Are there experts in your inner world who possess and use divine weapons?" The old man rolled his eyes. "There's a guy inside my body. He's reached the cultivation base of Soul Sea Realm. He directly occupies all the space in my body and proclaims himself to be the sacred emperor. He even hid the 1,000 divine weapons I had stored in my inner world. He thinks that they are his own. Silly him. Dang, bring them out." After that, the old man pointed his finger and a bright gold bracelet suddenly appeared out of nowhere and floated into his hands. The old man now laughed. "I came in a hurry and didn't have time to prepare something good. This bracelet is the only thing I thought was appropriate on this occasion. It's a bit too simple. I'm embarrassed to give you this. But it's a divine weapon after all, so I believe it will do the trick." The bracelet then floated towards Letitia. A divine weapon. Shock appeared on everyone's face. Some of them couldn't even believe what they were seeing and hearing with their own senses. A divine weapon is too simple. That's a divine weapon for crying out loud. Some people began to curse inwardly. The most powerful treasures in the central region were only some mid-grade sacred weapons, and even those were very few in number. People might have read about them in books, but the general public at least had never seen them in real life. And the old man had just said that as a present, the bracelet was too simple. It burned the other warriors up. Chapter 939, Margaret's Doubt. Zen was also taken aback by the old man's words, but it wasn't the divine weapon that incited this astonishment. Divine weapons were rare and precious, true. But with Zen's current level of knowledge, he wasn't too shocked after seeing one. He had, after all, a black star pickaxe. What shocked him was the old man's words. Warriors at the Soul Sea realm could open up a soul sea inside their bodies. But those at the Spirit Supreme realm could in fact, solidify their life vitality and build up a world of their own. For example, Brianna had operated on her inner world for 100,000 years. But she had only managed to create a tiny island, and the creatures on this island were still going through a primitive period. Warriors at such a high cultivation level didn't have much of a use for space rings. Their inner worlds could replace such small totems. This old man had also stored his treasures inside his belly. However, according to his words, there was also a Soul Sea realm master in the world inside his body, and that was inconceivable. The inner world was formed and solidified through life vitality, and the lives inside it were created by borrowing the power of thunder. They bred and evolved very, very slowly. After those living beings developed their wisdom to a certain extent, they could then borrow the life vitality from within the inner world they were living in and cultivate on their own. However, the space within such inner worlds was limited, and the resources available were very few. After all, such inner worlds were tiny. But even after that, somehow, the person inside this old man's inner world was able to cultivate himself to the soul sea realm. Just how large was his inner world? Just how strong was this old man? Seeing that Zen's face was filled with shock at his words, the old man waved his hand and told him, "All right, I've already given my gifts to both of you. Now your wedding ceremony is the most important thing, so just leave me alone and get on with your shenanigans. You can talk to me later if you want." Letitia bowed to the old man respectfully for the precious gift he had given her. Although this divine weapon was too simple, in the old man's eyes, it was still a precious item for her, and its value was more than a simple thing. She knew that the old man had given it to her for Zen's sake only, but that was no reason for her not to accept it with gratitude. At that moment, Margaret, who was going around in her everyday clothes, suddenly appeared some distance away. "Margaret, sister!" Xander and Brent shouted at the same time when they saw her. In fact, the people of the Shi family were not overly happy about today's wedding ceremony. They didn't want it to happen. However, it would be impolite for them to not attend, so they had to swallow their resentment and attend when Zen invited them. Before Margaret showed up, Xander and Brent had been very worried about her. They were afraid that she would be unhappy the entire day. Margaret nodded at her brother and her great-grandfather in reply. Her eyes fell on Letitia and she immediately felt a pang of sadness coming over her. The reason why she had stayed in the kitchen and decided to look after the culinary affairs was because she didn't want to see this scene. Of course she had already persuaded herself not to be jealous of Letitia, but she wasn't a machine. She could only try to control her emotions, but she could never sweep them away completely. Bitterness stirred inside her when she saw what a perfect match Zen and Letitia were for each other. The small ancestral dragon had disappeared some moments ago. She was afraid that it would get lost, so she had come out to search for it and had finally arrived here in its pursuit. The ancestral dragon let out a happy roar when it saw Margaret and jumped over towards her. It had rushed over when it sensed that Zen was seemingly in danger. Now that it had made sure that Zen was unharmed, it suddenly thought of the delicacies it had yet to taste in the kitchen. It let out several intimate sounds and threw itself into Margaret's arms. This small episode of course wasn't going to disturb the progress of the wedding ceremony. Zen and Letitia began to go on with the rites. The old man, who was seated in a corner, suddenly focused his gaze on Margaret. He opened his mouth and called out, "Young lady." "What?" Margaret looked around curiously, but she didn't know who had called out to her. "Young lady, please come over here." The old man used his life vitality to speak to Margaret this time. Margaret looked around again and finally found out that the person talking to her was a slovenly old man. She frowned and an impatient expression appeared on her face. She didn't want to bother herself with this person. Her cultivation base was still at the internal elixir realm, so she had no idea just how strong the old man was at all. And being in the kitchen the whole time, she didn't even know what had happened just now. She had always neglected cultivation practices because she didn't have much of an interest in martial arts. In her eyes, there was no difference between a life and death realm warrior and a spirit supreme realm warrior. She held the ancestral dragon tightly in her arms and was about to leave. She couldn't stand seeing Zen and Letitia's display of their affections any longer. She could learn to be magnanimous as time passed, but not now. Seeing that Margaret was about to leave, the old man couldn't hold himself back anymore. He had read her mind through her expressions, so he snorted and asked, "Young lady, do you feel resentful upon seeing the man you love marry some other woman?" Hearing this, Margaret's expressions changed. She glared at the old man and asked in an unfriendly tone, "What's it got to do with you?" The old man chuckled and replied, "I just want to give you a piece of advice. It is true that the bride is carrying the day right now. But in the future, the person who will spend countless years with Zen will be nobody but you." Immediately, Margaret's face was filled with astonishment. What did he mean by that? Although she couldn't figure it out, but these words were enough to make her walk towards the old man with curiosity. The maidservant brought over a chair for her, and she sat down next to the old man. Curiosity was revealed on everyone's faces when they saw that, and even Zen's attention was drawn. Letitia, who had Zen's hand in her own, emitted a small strand of life vitality from her fingertip when she noticed his gaze. The cold energy was transferred from her fingertip to Zen's palm. He turned around and met her angry gaze, which made him feel both alarmed and apologetic. After all, it was the day of their marriage. Letitia's displeasure was obvious in her face when she saw him staring at some other woman. Women. What did you mean just now, sir? Margaret asked curiously. As this old man had mentioned Zen without any signs of hostility, her tone was much friendlier now. She even revealed a gentle smile on her face. The old man smiled and asked instead of replying, never mind that. I just want to be sure about something. You have the purple power body, am I right? Margaret nodded in reply. In fact, if I am not mistaken, you have the black purple power body, which is the top grade. Don't you know what that means? The old man continued to ask. Margaret shook her head without any signs of expression on her face. She wasn't interested in martial arts, and her enthusiasm for cultivation was even less than what she had for her newly learned cooking skills. She had little aspirations, and all that she wanted was to stay by Zen's side. Although she knew that she had the black-purple power body, she had no idea just how strong it could be or what use it had. To be frank, it wasn't too difficult to understand that. The purple power world was a very special one, and there were countless great masters with the same physique staying within it. As long as she took a casual walk in the purple power world, it would be very easy for her to find numerous powerful masters who would be more than happy to help her. After all, anyone with the black-purple power body had the potential to control the purple power world. It was extremely rare to find someone who possessed it in the entire universe. The problem was that once Margaret had activated her purple power body, she had only borrowed the huge swords from within it and had once pulled Zen and Letitia into the purple power world to save them. At other times, she had never used her powers and in fact, had steered clear of the world she belonged to. No wonder the old lady didn't notice you. The old man shook his head and then asked, do you want to become a master? How about I find you a teacher? Margaret stared at him with a strange expression on her face. She felt like he was simply talking nonsense. She was willing to sit here and listen to him because he had told her that she could stay with Zen for countless years in the future, but now he was talking about irrelevant matters like teaching and becoming a master. Why should she become a super master? Why should she find a teacher? Did that have anything to do with Zen? Margaret was becoming impatient again, and she answered perfunctorily, no, thank you. I have no interest in that. What? You have no interest? Don't you understand my words? You could become a powerful cultivator who can look down on everyone else in the entire universe. What the old man didn't know was that he was now deviating from the main point that he had mentioned just now and thereby losing Margaret's attention. So what if I become more powerful than everyone else? What fun would that be? Margaret began to doubt that the old man was just making a fool of her. She stood up from her seat and decided to leave with the ancestral dragon in her arms. Seeing her actions, the old man thought for a moment and finally discovered the crux of the problem. He now understood that this young lady had no interest in martial arts at all. But even so, he was not disappointed because he also found a way to convince her otherwise. Chapter 940, Persuasion. Don't go, little girl. Listen to me, the old man hurriedly said. It was then when he realized he made a mistake. Never had he thought that there would be such strange people in the world who treated martial arts like garbage. But then again, everyone had their own ambitions. In reality, he had seen many strange warriors of the celestial position. Since this young woman was interested in Zen, he could easily use him as bait. Seeing the old man's expression, Margaret tried to put a damper on her temper and returned to her seat. Still wearing a cold expression, she asked him, what is it you still want to say? With a chuckle, he replied, although you aren't the bride in today's grand ceremony, I can guarantee that you can be the one to stay by Zen's side for the days to come. That bit caught her attention. What do you mean? She asked, blinking her eyes as she focused. With a shake of his head, he looked at Letitia. That bride isn't half bad. She might be a top warrior in the lower world, but that means nothing in the upper world. Letitia's talent might be on par with Fiona's, or even Amber's, but her name could, at most, be placed on only the second row of the talent tablet. This level could only get the recognition of the celestial position. It was nothing special in the old man's eyes. Does this have anything to do with me? Margaret said, sounding confused. As the old man talked casually, Margaret didn't know how to respond. Chuckling again, he responded, why, of course it has something to do with you. Zen is a truly powerful warrior. How can such a remarkable warrior be limited to the mere central region? What do you mean by, limited to a small central region? It's a vast area with abundant resources. Where else would Zen ever need to go in the future? In her eyes, the central region was the whole world. Perhaps, she knew of a divine kingdom continent not too far from there. Perhaps she even knew that the world was divided into several levels. But what did any of that have to do with her? The central region wasn't half bad, in her opinion. As for Zen, it was perfect, as no threat could be posed to him in the area. Being able to live a peaceful and comfortable life in the region was already a plentiful blessing. Though Margaret wasn't necessarily short-sighted, she wasn't interested in anything else. For instance, after she awakened her first-rank purple power body, Margaret also had a vague idea about her special physique. But never did she consider cultivating it, nor developing her strength. It just wasn't meaningful enough to her. Of course, the old man couldn't help but roll his eyes at her response. It was rather pathetic to him, hearing her call the central region a vast land with abundant resources. From his perspective, the entire central region was a distance that could be traversed in a mere few steps, compared to the rest of the universe. It wasn't even comparable to one of his courtyards, nor his internal world. As for resources, the central region was even lacking. When the poor warriors of the central region saw one of his divine weapons, their eyes were all glowing with envy. They looked like hungry ghosts that had been starved for decades. All of them seemed to be good for nothing. A divine weapon was considerable treasure for the virtual tribulation realm warriors of the upper world. But such a divine weapon was no rare thing. So to the old man, the central region was merely a backward, poor area, lacking in all aspects of development. But because Margaret had quite a testy temper, he didn't bother saying such words. Instead, with another chuckle, he continued, the central region is vast in your eyes. But with Zen's talent, along with the heavenly oracle pill that I fed him, Zen's cultivation base will soon increase tremendously. After he breaks through to the Soul Sea realm, he will be rejected by this great world, all to ascend to the upper world. As he explained it, he could tell that Margaret was not interested in the matters of ascension to the upper world, nor of repairing the flying passage. In reality, she might not have even known about the flying passage at all, so he figured it would be wise to keep things to himself. But to his surprise, Margaret's face turned angry as she berated, "You can't fool me. You're a bad man, not one of your deeds has been out of the goodness of your heart." The accusation left the old man speechless in surprise. As he had already given Zen a heavenly oracle pill, how could Margaret still say he hadn't done anything good? Why was he the bad guy in her eyes? Wearing a rather comical gaze, he stared at her. Even without the pill, he'll still fly into the upper world. And then, Margaret still asked, "Well, with your first-rank purple power body, your cultivation speed will not be slower than his. Once he enters the upper world, his bride will definitely not be able to ascend to the upper world immediately. Zen can only bring her there after he makes some great achievement. Otherwise, she'll need at least 1 or 2 centuries to fly into the upper world with her own strength." And then, she just asked again. With a roll of his eyes, the old man continued, "Surely, it's all clear now. You may also fly into the upper world soon. With your physique, you can keep up with Zen's pace and assist him well. In that case, you'd be able to stay by his side, right? But as for this new bride, she'll have to wait here alone for over 100 years. While Margaret was hearing his compelling words, something suddenly clicked in her mind. "I see," she exclaimed as her eyes lit up. With a chuckle, the old man went on, "So, let me find a master for you. You should enter the purple power world often to cultivate. When your cultivation improves, you'll be able to fly into the upper world and be with Zen." With that, he cast a deliberate, disdainful glance at Letitia. "She's better off and more popular than you are right now, but don't be dispirited. Those who have the last laugh can smile the brightest, right?" All of a sudden, Margaret's eyes were full of passion and determination. Never had she pursued anything in the field of martial arts. She had relied on all kinds of pills after reaching the internal elixir realm. Without her purple power body, she was inferior even to many illuminating soul realm warriors. But the old man gave her enough hope to make a shift in her mindset. For Zen, she knew she could endure Letitia with a smile on her face when she married Zen in the grand ceremony. But now that there was a way for her to be with him, she decided that she wouldn't give up too easily. "Yes, I understand now." Tilting her head, she asked again, "You said that you would find me a master. That will be you, right?" With a shake of his head, he replied, "Of course not. My wife shall be your master." Many of the warriors with purple power bodies were women, so it made sense for a woman to serve as her master instead of the old man. "But, where is she?" Margaret asked curiously. Stretching out his withered hand, he said, "Give me your hand." In spite of the initial confusion on Margaret's face, she offered her hand anyway. "Open your hand," he ordered again. Obediently, Margaret opened up her fair, delicate palm. Suddenly, a scarlet cross appeared on the old man's finger. The divine texture within it was similar to the celestial position's location rune, only smaller than the actual one. Whoosh! As soon as the scarlet cross appeared, it submerged into Margaret's palm. It was eye-catching across her white, tender skin. When Margaret raised her hand to examine it, her face filled with worry. "What is this?" "It's only a location rune," the man replied. "When you enter the purple power world in the future, my wife will be able to find you." "The next time I enter the purple power world. But I don't intend to enter it," Margaret confessed. Unless someone chased after her, she wouldn't hide in there any other time. The man's eyes grew wide as he remarked, "Exactly how much do you hate cultivating? You have to find some time to enter the purple power world. So long as you do, my wife can find you. You must work diligently and strive for your own future happiness." With that, he gave an intentional signal with his lips as he turned toward the happy scene over there. At this time, many guests had already arrived and engaged in idle chat. Meanwhile, Zen and Letitia were brimming with joy. Throwing the couple a cold, unseen glare, Margaret nodded, now determined. "Okay, I got it now.